Did you guess 14?
I did.
Then you guessed correctly.
Nice, because I usually just add one to the last thing,
That makes
but the
sense.
last thing was popcorn perspectives.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, this is different.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
I
So you
just
had me thinking about Sweetwater. So, because I've been playing around with the idea of like taking two of my mid-range guitars and turning them
okay.
in for like a really good pro guitar.
Sure.
So I've been thinking about, even though it's really a great color, taking my Telecaster and my PRS and exchanging them for like a top of the line Telecaster. And there is currently a vintage 75 Telecaster Deluxe that's one of the demo guitars. So it's normally like a $2,300 guitar, and this one is $1,699, and saving $100 because it's a demo version, and it might have like a little screw on it.
Yeah.
And if I sold my other two guitars, I would probably come pretty close to on that.
It's not
It's a
bad.
thought.
It's not a bad thought.
It's a thought, because
Yeah.
with the amount that I have and how many I actually like regularly play, it wouldn't hurt
3.
to take two. Yeah, I've been playing the Jag and the and now that I've got the Relish back in good working order, I'm really liking the
4.
way that's playing. So I play 4 for the most part, 4 electrics. So it wouldn't.
But 3. I
The
haven't
less
seen you
is still.
play. I haven't seen you play the Strat in a while.
Yeah, but I put that away when I like brought the Jag back out for a little bit.
Right.
So like they're still in the rotation. Like I still like the Strat. Like I mean, it's sitting right here next to my desk because I was playing along with stuff I was working on earlier.
Sure, man. I get you. Listen,
I do that with the SG sometimes too.
Yeah.
But like I definitively don't really play the Tele or the PRS, so.
Yeah. Are you? Oh, you weren't all the way screwed in.
Oh, sorry.
That's what was happening. Good call. Good call. Thank you for texting me, someone. Sydney. Thank you for texting me, Sydney.
And now we know.
All right. I'm going to just make sure I have a reel pulled up. I believe I do. Oh, man. What a freaking day, dude.
Rough one?
Yeah, I was in this like training for like 2 hours, and it was like a slog, but it's like I'm on a call, so I have to like sit on the call and like listen. Yeah. And then like we finished.
Do you have to be on camera?
Thank God, no, absolutely not.
That's good,
dude. Like, I don't know if I ever have to not work here anymore. Like putting on a shirt again to work will suck. I despise the thought.
I agree.
Like I literally I've just lessened my sleeves. I have like a bunch of sleeveless undershirts now, and that's my uniform.
You finally caught the fever.
Yeah, dude. I hate wearing clothes.
I fucking hate sleeves.
I hate sleeves too, honestly, at this point.
Literally all they are is a repository for fucking sweat.
See,
all that happens with sleeves is they just get a big fucking sweat stain right here every time, no matter what I do.
Yeah, I don't have that. Oh, you know what I was going to tell you about? I don't know how much it actually bothers you because like I barely ever really notice it, but I know that you've struggled with it before. There's this new like formula thing called Carpe that like supposedly like just stops that from happening.
Really?
It's apparently like really good. There's like a deodorant and like a body wash you can use. Okay. So you could look into it. It's like I think it's like $40 or $50 for like 6 months worth or something.
Okay, I consider that. That my only question is because my other curse is, of course, I have very sensitive skin.
Right.
which is like I have one type of deodorant I can wear, and most of the time it won't sting my skin when I put it on, but sometimes it
Yeah.
still does. And like if I like try to change something about what I'm
Have
using, like my
you?
skin
Do you
hurts.
use powder or gel deodorant?
I don't the kind that's not
The
gel,
white
the white
kind.
kind, yeah.
Have you tried using the kind that's not like liquid gel?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like that's probably I think
Because
I've
I
used
have
it
sensitive skin
before.
too, and when I use
Yeah.
powder deodorant, I get like a reaction to it, so I
Mhm.
have to use gel.
And it starts to get red and like real irritated and
Hmm.
burns.
Gel eliminated that for me.
Interesting. Okay.
So something to consider, or carpe, or both. But again, your call. I saw a commercial for
Mhm.
it, and I told my brother about it because he also struggles with some sweat
Yeah.
stuff. And then you just mentioned that, and I was like, I
Yeah.
just
This
did a
is
little bit
it.
of research on
Yeah.
this. All right.
We should begin.
Well, you know what they say.
And we're saving our gummies for betwixt the episodes, right?
Of course. Of course we are. Just because I want to be able to actually talk about the second artists.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like they've earned that right to be discussed.
I agree.
All right, let me just make sure. Boom. Bada bingo. Okay. Well, nobody's here yet, so
That's all right.
let's do it.
Just hit it. 3, 2, 1.
Why'd you have to go and make this another podcast?
I knew that's where you were going.
I was trying to
I
think of
was
a way
sitting
to
there, I was like,
incorporate Skater Boy,
hmm.
but all I could come up with.
She was a pod, he was a cast. Can you make it any more obvious?
But I went for the chorus, and all I could think of
Mhm.
was, "She was a Totem Talks. She said, see you,
No.
Lotem Talks."
No. You gotta go with he was a pod, she
He
was
was
a
a
cast.
pod. She was a cat. That's a good one.
Right?
Look, if I had thought about it for more than during the intro, I probably would have
Yeah.
had something.
I mean, but I feel like you lose a little bit of the integrity and authenticity if you would all think about these things.
Exactly. I completely agree.
And the
And
only reason
sometimes,
anyone comes here is for the authenticity, honestly, because it's certainly not for the quality of the content.
that's probably true. That's correct. But I definitely think that like sometimes like you strike gold. Like I had a really good one the one time, and
Mhm.
you were like convinced I had rehearsed it. And I was like, no, that's the point. I
And
never do.
I love it.
So sometimes it's just good.
Mhm.
What's up, everybody? How we doing today? I will wait for an answer.
All right.
Good. Thank you for that. Thank you for letting me know
Oh, yeah.
individually how you're doing.
That's right.
And this is season 6, episode 14 of Totem Talks. And if you're like, what the hell is Totem Talks? Well, I don't know how you found us then.
Yeah, what a bizarre
Congratulations.
episode to find us on.
But we're a music podcast, and we've determined that only we can determine the greatest musical artist of all time. I don't know why I said artist like that, but
Artist.
the artist. We be looking for musical artists.
That's right.
And we're determining the greatest one of all time.
That's right.
And could it be today? Could we
No.
answer the question today? Well, you never know.
Depends on what you mean by today.
Look,
But no.
probably not today, but we will get one step closer today, and that's all that matters.
That's right.
So you're Nick, I'm
am.
Pat. Together we are Totem Talks.
Our Nat.
Yes, together we are. Yes, we're Nat. But why don't you go ahead and let us know what artists we're covering today, Nick?
So today's theme is punk adjacent acts and how different different offshoots punk can be. So of course we're starting off with the queen of punk herself, Avril Lavigne.
Yes,
and we're following her up with Social Distortion.
Yes,
and that is that. And it's your turn to go first and talk about Avril.
It is my turn to talk about Avril. And yeah, without any further ado, we'll get rolling with Avril Ramona Lavigne is a Canadian singer songwriter, and she's been active since 1999. And we got to cover 3 Avril albums. We started with her debut album, which was Let Go. We followed that up with, which came out in 2002, sorry. We followed that up with Under My Skin from 2004. And then we wrapped it up with Love Sucks from 2022. So, skipped a little bit in the middle there,
A
but
little.
that's the way it works out. And I guess I'll just keep on keeping
Yeah, just keep
on.
trucking.
So Let Go. This was an interesting album for me. It's the one that has the most nostalgia for
Mhm.
sure. I mean, this album, honestly, I'm surprised it came out in 2002. Like, I feel like,
Maybe a little earlier, you thought?
maybe a little later.
Oh, okay.
Because like I was 10. I feel
Mm.
like these songs were still enduring when I was like 13 or
Yeah,
14.
that's true.
And I had thought maybe it had come out like around there.
Yeah. I mean,
But
but
no.
you look at the album cover,
Oh, it's
and it's
so
very
early
2002.
2000s. Yeah, it absolutely
Yeah.
is. And here's what I'm going to say, man. I was very surprised at a lot of the things on this album. Obviously, I knew it had Complicated. I knew it had Skater Boy. So I knew some of the stuff to expect. It was really interesting. It was like Alanis Morissette in the 2000s is the vibe that it was giving off. Not every single song, because it goes a little more poppy than Alanis ever got to. But like at its most biting, it was like Alanis meets like Blink 182 with like a hint of like post grunge thrown in there.
It's
Which,
interesting. I have things to say. Very similar thing. Alanis Morissette also found her way into my notes for this album.
sure, that makes a lot of sense. But that's exactly what it felt like. It was very interesting. And the first thing I did after I listened through the album was immediately look to see how much Avril Lavigne actually contributed to it,
Sure.
because I thought the writing was very strong. Lyrically, there was some cheesy moments, but like it was supposed to be like she's writing from a teenager's point of view.
Yeah. Well, she
But I
is, isn't she? Isn't she
yeah,
17 when this comes out?
comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so of course. Uh but like there's a lot of like depth in the tracks and in even the lyrics as it's being cheesy, of like a surprising amount for somebody this age. And the first song was a song that I had either never heard or haven't heard in years, Losing Grip.
Mhm.
Might be the best song on the album. Very very like late grunge sound to it, but also like a very good vocal from her. If I had to like pick songs, Losing Grip, Complicated, and Skater Boy are the 3 for me, which
Mhm.
is literally the first 3 tracks.
Yeah.
So I can just take them, and then the rest of the album I enjoyed. The only song I didn't really enjoy was Nothing. What is that?
Okay.
I wrote Nothing. I don't see that here on the track listing. Am I crazy?
Maybe, but I can say there was one song I particularly did not enjoy that I'll get
Oh,
to. So
wait, maybe I
perhaps
just wrote
you'll
that I didn't dislike a song.
okay, because I was gonna say there might be one, and
Okay.
you'll know what I'm talking about when I bring it up.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to decipher notes. Newsflash for anybody who doesn't tune in live, we had to skip a week due to
Yeah.
me completely losing my voice randomly. I didn't really get sick. I just
Lost your voice.
had like crazy laryngitis for,
A
and I guess
while.
it does kind of make sense because we're doing weekly episodes,
Yeah.
and also we were gigging like 3 times a weekend for a month and a half at that point.
Yeah.
So, it made sense, but definitely had to skip a week. So I'm trying to remember, I'm trying to put myself back where I wrote these down.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm doing the same thing.
So
Yeah,
whatever. But yeah, I think Nothing was meant I didn't actively dislike a song from this
sure.
album.
Okay. So, uh, to get to sort of what I was saying, or what you were saying before with Alanis Morissette. So, I was reading as I listened to this album on Apple Music. They'll always have like a little description or maybe some
Hashtag not a
background on the
sponsor.
album. Yeah, definitely not a sponsor. Um, and they compare her music to both Alanis Morissette and Kelly Clarkson. And I'm
Oh,
like, It kind of does sit right in the middle of those 2 things.
Sure, I
Like, it's
get
got
that.
half of the alternative Alanis sound and mindset, and it's got half of the poppier sensibilities of, like, straightforward top 40 of Kelly Clarkson.
Yeah,
And it kind of just sits in that little sweet spot right in the middle of them, and I think that's good for what it is. That's what it's trying to be, and I think that it finds that spot comfortably. Um, it's not necessarily I probably won't revisit a lot of it, but for the most part, I had a soft spot for it because it definitely is an album of nostalgia,
for sure.
particularly the songs and then the sound overall for me. Um, the one thing that I had a real issue with was the song "Nobody's Fool" because someone convinced her that she should do, like, a rap verse in
You
that
know,
song, and the best part, the
yeah,
irony of it was the lyrics of the rap verse were all about how people were turning her into someone else. I'm like,
maybe that's the
"Oh,
point.
it coulda been the point, but, ooh, it did not work. It did not work."
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, hey, if it worked for
but
her, right? That's kind of art, right?
sure. Yeah, I it did not work for me to listen to Avril rap.
I understand completely. Honestly, I
Yeah.
understand completely.
Oh, yeah, and actually, I did know the song "I'm With You." I was a song I didn't know that I knew, but when I come on, I was like, "Oh, I know this."
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I had listened to, I had heard a bunch of these songs.
mm.
Let me be clear. That's
Yeah, I
why I
was
was
only
surprised
sure
I'd
that I
never
knew the
heard.
2 of them, but then I had one other that I recognized.
Sure.
But I'll
Yeah,
move on.
I'd heard like going through this album, like throughout the years, I've heard multiples of these.
Okay. So, on this out I actually the first thing I did was kinda check. It's like, "Alright, well, we're still in the era in which I might know some Avril Lavigne songs." So read the track listing. I was like, "I know none of these songs." And then I
No.
heard the song "My Happy Ending," and I was like,
Yeah.
"I vaguely know that, sort of." I couldn't sing along to it, but I've definitely heard it before. And I think this album overall, it leans a little bit more into the Kelly Clarkson and a little further from the Alanis Morissette. It's still in the middle of those 2, but this
Yeah.
album definitely is a poppier move for her. And that combined with the nostalgia factor, that it was lacking compared to album 1 with the songs that I knew growing up. For me, that made it suffer a little bit relative to album 1. It's a little bit less my style. I had a little bit less of a home to sit in, but I mean, it certainly wasn't bad. I certainly didn't think that the album is at this point, it's a pop album with some pop punk roots or post grunge or whatever you want to call the style that she's doing. And it's fine. It sits right ahead in that like 2004 space, and it makes sense that it was popular at that time. But I'm not gonna revisit it, even though I didn't think it was at all a bad album.
Yeah, listen, so you said you used your comparisons from the first album to say exactly what I said, which was more poppy, less grumpy. It was exactly the same. Yeah, it skewed a little further pop, not quite in like bubblegum territory. It's still like a
No,
like an angsty pop.
yeah, for sure.
She still sounds good vocally. I think she's like oft maligned for her voice. I've come to
I
find
don't
in
get
my
that.
research.
Hmm.
Yeah, she's like, listen, she's not like Pink or she's not Kelly Clarkson
Yeah,
in
right.
terms of her vocal ability,
Sure.
but
She's not a bad singer at all.
she's got a really good voice. I mean,
Yeah,
think of Alanis Morissette. She's not, you don't compare her to like Whitney Houston.
right.
She
But
doesn't
I
have
like
that
her music a
voice,
lot
but I
better.
like her music.
Yeah.
So I think that I didn't have any complaints about her vocal on this
Mhm.
album.
No, not at all.
I thought that this album is where there were a couple lyrical misses. Nothing like too offensive, but the song "He Wasn't" was one that stuck out to me, of the lyrics being
Mhm.
like a little rough around the edges, I'd say.
Oh, just
Which
wait.
is yeah, which is fine. It happens, but I was a little less in love with this album for sure. As you kind of mentioned, the nostalgia had worn off, but I
Mhm.
will
Yeah.
highlight two tracks, which is "Nobody's Home."
Mhm.
I thought was really good, and also it's interesting. It's one of three tracks I think that Levine is the only credited lyricist on.
Oh, okay.
and I thought the lyrics were very strong on this album, on this song. And then the other one was How Does It Feel?
Mm.
I thought both of those
Fine.
were I thought both of those were good tracks. Those are probably ones that I'll revisit if I ever revisit Avril
Sure.
Lavigne. So I'll take us into Love Sucks. And what to say about Love Sucks? It came out in 2022, so we've jumped a long time.
We have 18
And
years.
yeah. Listen, I don't hate this album. I know that Nick is going to come in here and hate the album, and I understand if you do. I'm not gonna sit here and like super defend it. It's definitely shows that like there was a time in our lives, you and I particularly, where our musical taste aligned with Avril Lavigne.
Sure.
And I think that we have just gone completely in different directions. What I will say about this album is I feel like with pop artists around this era who've been around for as long as Avril has, there's the tendency to jump the shark and like completely sell out. And I don't think she did. I think she's working with artists that she wanted to work with,
That's fine.
such as
I
John
get that.
Feldman from Goldfinger and Mark Hoppus from Blink.
Sure.
And I think she's doing that stuff, which is good. She also worked with Cannonball with Mod Sun, who she might have been engaged to at the time.
Oh, interesting.
She had an engagement to Mod Sun. I knew that from my research in Avril, not just in life.
Yeah.
But it definitely doesn't align with my musical interests. It's more like punk and pop. More punk than pop, and not in like the way that she had been punk. More like angry punk than pop.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing that for me was like, it almost felt like she previous lyrics and like, lyrical ability that she'd had with like just a bunch of like swear words throughout the album. Like the first line of the first album is like, I forget the exact line, but the song's called Cannonball, and it's something like, let's get up and ready to go, motherfuckers. Like,
yeah,
Avril, hold on.
Feels like you're trying a little too hard.
It felt a little forced. And then there was two things that on this album that physically angered me. One, I struggle with Machine Gun Kelly as a performer because he was a rapper. I don't know if you know this about Machine Gun Kelly. Former rapper, switched to the pop punk world. He sounded okay on this album. Like he's the one who sings in Boys Lie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember.
He sounded like okay. However, it's all computerized because I've heard the dude sing live. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare scenario.
It is a nightmare.
So that frustrated me. And two, I don't know if this bugged you as much as it bugged me, dude. Track 7, Avalanche.
Oh my god.
This woman pronounces that shit
avalanche. It was driving me nuts.
And over again. Literally, I had
was
like a
at
whole
one
bunch
point
of
I was
notes.
like, wait, do people in Canada just pronounce it avalanche? Is that just Canadian? Those were the thoughts going through my head.
I was like getting angry. I'm like, stop saying avalanche, please.
Mm-hmm. Like, I'm so glad that you also had this. Like, I was so frustrated,
dude. It was like crazy to me. I was like, am I taking crazy pills right now?
No. You're right. She is wrong. It is
my only other note was I could have had no idea that Mark Hoppus was on this album. I could have had no idea at all. I could have been in a coma for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And the second that song, All I Wanted, came on, I was like, oh, Blink-182 wrote this song.
Yeah.
And of course, yeah, if that features Mark Hoppus, he's on the track. And I was like, yeah, it's such a Blink song.
Yeah.
Immediately you can feel like the tempo is doubled.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right.
That's what I got.
So let me start by saying that this album has received a 74 out of 100 on Metacritic, which is a very high rating. It's
Oh, this album is
actually
critically acclaimed.
it is actually the highest acclaimed album that she has ever put out. And I mean, uh, all of the music aside, like I don't even want to talk about what was played on any of these songs. If you told me right now that Avril Lavigne, who was 37 when this album came out,
Yeah.
had like a niece who was 12 who desperately wanted to get into the music industry and was like trying to learn to write songs with her. And she was like, "That's so awesome. I want to encourage you and help." And she let her 12-year-old niece write all of the lyrics to this whole album.
Yeah.
I would have been like, okay, it's still not good, but a 12-year-old wrote it, so I'm gonna let it slide. But the fact that a 37-year-old woman who has, like, shown some competency as a writer, ri like, these are the worst lyrics, like, that of someone who is just trying to actually write songs instead of just writing, like, aggravating, horrible nonsense like Ted Nugent, who's
It's
just being
rough.
inflammatory. Like, these lyrics took me out of every single song. The
Sure.
lyrics are so bad. Like, I was listening to a lot of this album with my wife, and, like, ev every 30 seconds, we would stop and just look at each other. Like, "Did you hear what I just heard? Are those
Yeah.
the real lyrics that an actual adult woman is writing?" And they're horrible.
They're
They
not
are
great.
this is really juvenile, and that's,
Yeah.
like that's like, I think that I my ninth graders could write better lyrics than this.
I have
It's
a
bad.
I
I don't know
have a
what else to say.
soapbox statement, that I composed after this album, knowing like, I preemptively was ready for you
Mhm.
because I knew how bad these lyrics were, and I was like,
Oh,
"Nick's gonna
man.
crucify this."
Yes.
And I knew you were, and I'm not even gonna really defend it because
Yeah.
I can't defend it, and I'm not
It's
gonna try.
indefensible.
One thing that I completely forgot and I do wanna shout out, "Love It When You Hate Me" has an artist called Black Bear on
Mhm.
it, and he's a good singer. He sounded really good. I
Wonderful.
enjoyed his vocal.
That was nice of you to say something positive.
Yeah, I forgot to mention I did enjoy his vocal. Also, she sounds decent vocally.
Yeah, sure. And like I said, that's why I didn't even comment on the music 'cause I
Yeah,
it's almost like I couldn't hear it. And
sure,
you know
I get
me.
that.
I am like a 99% the music guy,
Yeah,
and as long as the lyrics aren't absolutely god awful,
and
I
they
can at
they
least
are.
get past it as long as there's something really good going on in the instrumentation. I couldn't get past 10 seconds of these words on this album.
Yeah, it really hits you like an avalanche.
An avalanche, yes.
Okay. So here was my soapbox standing on
Yeah, go
this.
ahead.
I have a new theory based on this album from Avril Lavigne.
Okay.
I feel like we as a society are no longer allowed to condemn artists whose demographic just doesn't change. I think
Mm,
that's the big problem with Avril Lavigne. I think she writes songs her entire career. She's been writing songs for 17-year-old girls.
mhm.
And I think 17-year-old girls have changed in the last 20 years. And that's what happened.
Eh,
Is now she's
have they
still
become
writing to
more
them.
juvenile?
I feel like with the era of like TikTok and things like that, I
Mhm.
feel like the angst that teenage girls feel may be represented in a different way. That's what it
Okay.
strikes to me. Like it really like this out. That's what I was trying to get at earlier. Like,
Mhm.
remember when Fallout Boy we talked about Fallout Boy's latest album and it was like hot garbage
Yes.
because it appealed to the median
Mhm.
and it had no artistic intent at all.
Sure.
I don't feel that here. What I feel is somebody who we used to speak the same language, and then I turned around and then I come back and they're speaking a different language, and I'm very confused by it.
Sure.
That's what
I totally get what you're saying,
yeah.
but I do think that if you're, like, over the age of 14 and you found these lyrics to be anything
Oh,
but awful,
true.
like, it's time to take a look at yourself. Like, this it's just for,
This is a
like,
wake-up call.
preteens and early teens to, like,
Let me
listen
be
to
clear.
and
Nick
relate
is
to.
only saying all this because she spelled sucks with an X. and Nick's an
No.
English teacher.
Like I'm okay with artistic liberties in spelling if they make sense.
That's true.
I mean,
Listen,
like,
I'm just kidding.
yeah,
Look, I'm not, I can't I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not really defending
right. It's
the
just it.
album.
I'm just saying, like, it appeals to a very narrow demographic of, like,
Yeah,
let's say, precocious 9-year-olds to like 14-year-olds. And
sure.
if you've grown out of that demographic and this is still really relating to you in some way other than nostalgia for when if you grew up with it, like a little self-reflection now. It's
I get
time
it.
to start growing.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. I got some facts about
Yes.
Miss Levine.
Please. I'm excited to hear.
So I had two unique things. Unique thing number one, my statement is, how Canadian is she? Because Avril literally played high school hockey as a
Of
right
course.
wing and won the high school MVP in the boys league for 2 years.
I love that.
So she was not only a hockey player, she was a good hockey player.
That's actually very awesome.
Yeah, I thought so, and it seemed pretty unique to me. And then, of course, the, the second one, because I can't not discuss it. And even though it's technically not unique, because one
Mhm.
other artist that we've discussed has had this happen, Avril Lavigne is the subject of a replacement theory, a conspiracy theory
Yes.
that the real Avril died soon after Let Go was released and was replaced by a woman named Melissa Vandella
That's
in
correct.
2003. And that's a real thing that like certain people like actually believe happened.
Yeah, of course it happened.
So, that's a I don't know what else to say. There's evidence used to support it, including like changes in her appearance. They say that like the shape of her nose, which is the big thing for McCartney as well,
Mhm.
like the shape of his nose changed. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
ooh,
People who don't understand that, like, camera angles and
uh-huh.
distance and lighting can change the way someone appears in pictures have a lot of these types of theories on the internet.
Yeah.
It's like if you
I
take 2 you could take 2 pictures of anyone and make them so different as to be almost unrecognizable if you use all those elements correctly. And almost anyone, if they look at, like, all of their own pictures that they have, could be like, "Oh, no, that's a doppelganger of me. I'm really dead, and so has taken my
it's
place."
it's been crazy. I had to bring that up. Highlight, I mean, how can you not talk about Let Go, the actual album and the success that it had? It skyrocketed in the charts when it came out. It's her most critically acclaimed album. It was, I believe, the highest selling album for a Canadian artist so far in the 20s in the 21st century.
Or at least in the 2010s it was. It might be for the full 21st century, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's still for the 21st century, according to what I had read,
Okay.
which good for her. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's well deserved. Great album. And it obviously sold extremely well, as we just discussed. Charted, not her highest chart because Love Sucks is, but definitely put her on the map. And great stuff. So we'll move on to the low light,
Mhm.
which I want to clarify. My stance on this is I call bullshit.
Okay.
So this is a low light where I'm defending the low light.
Sure.
So Avril Lavigne is had a controversy in about 2014 for a music video that came out for her song called Hello Kitty. Now,
Great character.
song opinion aside, I listened to the song. It was music. But uh we will talk about the what happened here is the music video was heavily influenced in Japanese culture. Makes
Sure.
sense. Hello Kitty's a
Yeah.
Japanese character, and it featured like sushi and like Japanese dancers in the background and all these things of Japanese culture. And she got heavily accused of like racism and like profiteering off of Japanese people and all of these like negative things. and it was like a kind of not huge controversy for her, but like a medium-sized controversy for
Yeah.
her when it all happened. And the reason I call bullshit on it is because Avril Lavigne, and this is a real true fact, everybody, is the most popular Western artist in Asia.
Hmm.
Avril Lavigne.
In
She's
terms
also
of
the
like album
first
sales or
in terms of album sales, in terms of just overall
huh,
popularity. She is considered the biggest Western artist in Asia. And she's also
fascinating.
the first Western artist to do a full tour in China with her The
Mhm.
Best Damn Tour in 2008, which
Sure.
we can talk about for X Factor later because I did put it in
Okay.
X Factor. But like my whole point is to say, like, this is a woman who basically spends half of her year in Japan every year,
Yeah.
is hugely popular in Asia, is very in the culture of Asia.
Right.
I don't think that's what happened. And I think that people were uninformed and just
Sure.
started blasting her. But that was a low light of her career.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. So had to talk about it.
Yeah.
The nicest thing that I saw Avril Lavigne do was start her charity. In 2010, she started the Avril Lavigne Foundation, which works heavily with both Make a Wish and the Ease MS charities and foundations themselves. She's real big on her foundation itself, is real big on helping people with disabilities.
Great. You
So
love to
good
see
for
it.
her. The
Love to
me
see like almost all the artists we cover in some way or another have charity involvement,
Yeah,
and I'm very grateful for that.
I truly like the biggest thing I think you can do when you start to have a name and a voice, and especially money,
Mhm.
is like put that money and fame and all that clout you gain back into the world in a positive way.
100%.
So like good for her for doing that.
Yep.
And then the meanest thing, this is another thing where I really didn't set out to be defending Avril Lavigne constantly, but I started looking up like because I couldn't really find anything on Wiki.
Sure.
There's no like controversies section.
Yeah.
So I start deep diving. I'm doing some Google searches like has Avril Lavigne ever done mean things or what or
Mhm.
has she been like a bitch to so whatever.
Sure.
The amount of articles that I found that are just like why Avril Lavigne is an asshole. Like why she's like blah blah, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
This one time I emailed her 10,000 times and she didn't get back to me personally.
dude, it was all just such petty bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are we talking about? She literally like one of the things that was it was the number one thing in two of these articles because I read five.
Sure.
I read five of these articles before I just stopped. The number one and two of them was that uh, she was getting like heavily criticized, like just in terms of her art, and she said in an interview like, I I don't really pay attention to that stuff. Like I used to take it really seriously when I was younger. And as I grew up, I realized like anybody who's going to criticize me or like me personally, they're the loser, not me.
Good for her.
And
I'm
they were
fully
like,
supportive of that.
and that like it was the number one was like she calls everyone who disagrees with her a loser. It's like
Oh, that's bullshit.
it was so
Like,
petty and
as someone
stupid.
who, like, did not like her most recent album at
Right.
all, I'm still fully supportive of her as a person and as an artist to continue making that stuff and to continue making those decisions, you know?
Right. I
You know,
and
because I
here's
never
the thing,
want I
even
never want our critiques of the music to be misunderstood as critiques of an artist or as a person or as us thinking that they like shouldn't keep doing what they're doing because just
yeah.
because we don't like something doesn't mean that that has anything to do with that artist. Like they should continue doing whatever makes them happy
I
regardless of how
also
much we
think
hate it.
I also think that works in reverse, and I think we're pretty clear. Like there has been multiple times where we have liked an artist and liked the music and been like, but they're kind of a
Sure.
giant
Hmm.
dick.
Yeah.
So I think I think we're very clear in our opinion as we go. Of like, I think
Sure.
Avril Lavigne's like a decent person who does good in the world and made good music to decent music to mediocre music at best.
But
I
being a
think
good person in the
she's
world is by far the most important of all those things.
and I agree. And then of course I had to find a 6 degrees
Of course.
and I found after much searching. No, I didn't really do much searching for this. I tried to find one that wasn't this,
Yeah,
and then I was like, you know what? She was married to Chad Kroger.
you're right.
So Chad Kroger is the lead singer of Nickelback. We did Nickelback. I'm like,
We
how
did.
am I not going to talk about that? That's got
Yeah,
to be the
that's
Six
fair.
Degrees. She was his wife.
Yeah, I would say they knew each other decently.
Yeah, right. Biblically,
You've been probably. I mean, I wasn't there.
you weren't. I was there.
Oh,
Everybody
I'm
gathered. It
sorry.
was a
Well,
party. Everybody gathered around.
as long as you're confirming.
It was like in medieval times when like
Yeah.
everybody who was at
Is
the
it time
wedding
for the
goes to watch
betting?
the consummation. Yeah, but that would imply I was invited
Uh,
to Avril and Chad's
that's
wedding, which I
true.
certainly
And
was
you
not.
know that when they take the bride and groom away for a betting, that's just curtains for all the Starks in the room. So,
Oh man, I love it.
okay. Shall
Okay,
we move on?
yeah, that's Avril Lavigne in a nutshell. So let's move on to social
Social distortion.
distortion. Dude,
Ugh.
I truly wish you were with me experiencing just the crazy stupidity of people and these articles about Avril Lavigne.
Of
And
course. And it's
I'm like trying to agree with them. Like
yeah, right.
part of my research is
Hmm.
finding a mean thing and agreeing with them.
Yeah,
And I'm just like, I'm the only person who should like I'm
I
trying
know.
actively to agree, and I just find you so petty and pedantic.
Yeah, I think when people do that shit about celebrities too, like I was at the airport once and this person was in a rush and they didn't stop and give me an autograph because they were running to catch a plane here. It's like, yeah, they're not. That doesn't make them a bad person.
Yeah,
This person was out having a private dinner with their family, and when I came up and tried to start a conversation with them 5 times, they politely asked me to please leave the table because they wanted to spend some time with their family. It's like, all right, dude,
yeah,
that doesn't make that famous person a bad person. It makes them a human being who
yeah.
like is trying to have a little bit of a
As far as I'm concerned, I never take those things.
no.
I see all the time, and you know why? Here's what I'm gonna say. This is gonna sound so fucking. I don't mean it like this. I really don't. But like I've had versions of that happen to me. Like we play in the area
Hmm.
quite often, and like I've had times, like especially when I worked at the bank, where
Hmm.
I would like I'd be working and then like I'd be like I'd have to go to my mom's to pick something up and then go home, and like my mom will call me on the way home like, hey, can you stop and get me a pack of cigarettes? I'm like, okay, fine. Like
All
I'm
right.
tired. I worked all
Hmm.
day, and I go into Wawa
Hmm.
and like somebody recognizes me from like
Sure.
our gigs,
Yeah.
and like that split second of like I have to immediately be a different person than I am right now.
Hmm.
And like I do it and I go and then I go about
Sure.
my day. And like it's not like I'm not like writing autographs and shit. Like I'm not a
No.
celebrity,
No.
but like it's definitely a thing where like you're
You could
recognized for a thing.
And if that happened with every person you ever met
Right. And
all
just the
the time,
volume of the time it has to happen to a real celebrity.
I
Because
can't
it
even
happened to
imagine.
me like once every 4 months and I get it.
Sure.
So like every day, like 10,
Yeah.
15 times a day, sure. And if you're having a bad day, like no way. If I met a celebrity and they were like standoffish towards me, I actually this happened to me. I will tell you the story. And again, I'm saying this in a way that does not
Mhm.
shade at all.
Sure.
I went and saw Sydney took me for my birthday. We went and saw Alton Brown's live like food science
Cool.
show. And it was awesome. It was like very
Mhm.
theatrical. They do this whole thing. There's like a band that plays the whole like it's really good. And I really enjoyed it. And it was in Philly. We went and saw it. So we're hanging out after the show outside, and we meet the keyboardist, and and he's great. We're like he's like really talkative dude. So we're talking to him
Mhm.
for like 20 minutes. Well, Alton Brown comes out and like goes like he walks like up to the keyboardist and like says something. And I said to him, I'm like, hey, like huge fan. We just saw your show, loved it. You guys are great. And he just was like, oh, thank you. Like very quietly, like not his normal like persona.
Sure.
Like, oh, thank you. And then like walked away. in a standoffish way.
Sure.
And like I was absolutely fine with it. I was like, makes sense. He just did a
Yeah.
huge performance. He's got another he's getting on the tour bus to go to
Right.
another performance.
He wasn't rude. He said thank
Yeah,
you. Because that's the way I think. Like, if I ever, I've never really been in that situation, but what I've thought of it is like, oh, what would I do? And what I've come to is, if someone was like an approachable situation, I would just come up and say, thank you so much for your work. It's meant a lot to me,
sure.
and then let them go on their way.
Yeah,
Unless they actually stopped and talked back to me about stuff, just like,
that's
hey, just letting you know, hey, I really appreciate what you've done. It's improved my life.
I think that is exactly the way to do it. You know, if you see somebody and you want to say something, a slight interjection, and then a nice peaceable retreat, I think is perfect.
I get.
And that's all it
All right.
is. Whatever. People are dumb.
Yeah.
All right. I'm assuming you want us to actually do social distortion.
I think we should.
Yeah, makes sense, right? Hold on, I can actually close out my 6 freaking Avril Lavigne
Yeah.
tabs
Yeah.
because I had the article pulled up for the Hello Kitty thing, and I
Sure.
had the article pulled up for the replacement theory, which is a real thing that people really had happen. Okay, hey, whatever. All right, I'm ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Social Distortion is an American punk rock band formed in 1978 in Fullerton, California. And they're still active today.
That's right.
And we got to cover 3 albums. We started with Mommy's Little Monsters, which came out in 1983. We followed it up with, thankfully, an eponymous album, Social
Yes.
Distortion. We finally got there. And then I'm sorry, that one came out in 1990. And then we wrapped it up with Hard Times and Nursery Rhymes, which came out in 2011.
And now it's my time to talk
It's
about
your
Mommy's
time to
Little Monster.
talk, buddy. Take it
So
away.
let me start with the 2 things that stuck out to me as the worst about this record.
Sure.
So, one, I don't think we're trying to kid anybody. Mike Ness can't really sing. He's not a good singer.
No.
And that's what that is. And the other thing I don't like is actually about the mix, because and this is actually true of their first 2 albums at least. I felt like the bass was not mixed well. I really felt like I was missing the bass in this album and also the next one. I'm just having a hard time hearing it very well in the mix. There should be more of it. There should be
Okay.
more.
I'm not gonna disagree on you.
But then I mean, so this album, it's 27 and a half minutes, which is nice.
Yeah.
It's described as hardcore punk, punk rock, melodic hardcore pop punk. I mean, yes, it is definitely punk. Social Distortion is definitely punk as part of what they do, but they are definitely like on the rockier end of punk rock, even in this first album, which is the punkiest of all of them. Like, just by looking at the track length, the fact that you've got several songs over 3 minutes in length, you've got one song that's over 5 minutes in length. This is not like the prototypical let's scream for a minute and a half, like hardcore punk. So for this to
Right.
be labeled like that is, I think, it's definitely misleading. Um, I think that there are 2 guitarists in this band, and neither one of them really resorts to like, let's play 3 or 4 power chords. Um, which is again one of those things that's kind of very typical of punk and that you might expect, like very, very simple. But even here, I feel like there's more complex 2 guitar parts going on throughout a lot of the songs, that they're layered really well, that they complement each other really well. So, going into it thinking that this was going to be like a 27-minute, like, hardcore punk album and that
Right.
the songs were gonna be like, there is much more musicality, there's much more melodicism to the playing and the approach. I think the rock end of the punk rock really shines through even on this first record, and I think that helps it. So at the end of the day, I didn't mind listening to this at all.
Cool. All right.
Mhm.
I think that what you said makes a lot of sense when you give it what your expectation was, which was like basically a dude deep throat screaming into a mic for a half hour, which was kind of my expectation when I read the genre listing as
Sure.
well.
Mhm.
Uh, and if that's your expectation, this album, I understand where you're coming from. However, I did not like this album that
Hmm.
much. I thought I get where you're coming from. I thought it had the building blocks to be okay,
Mhm.
but never really built on those blocks. It just included blocks.
There were
It was like
blocks.
I yeah, it was pretty much like I asked for like a Lego creation and you handed me like a sandwich baggie full of Legos. We're like, this is what I've given you.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, it's
It
all
could have been
there.
dirt in the
Right.
bag, but it was blocks. It was Legos.
Yeah, like you started.
Yeah.
But either way, I mean, yes, no singing really took place here, to
Mhm.
be clear. No singing of note, I will
Mhm.
say. And the guitar part, sure, all of that stuff. I did agree with you that the bass was very low.
Yeah.
Um, so all in all, like this is an album that I'll miss for playing from now on.
Sure. Yeah.
I will not go back to this one. That's
Mhm.
fine. I didn't hate it. Like
Yeah. Right.
I'm saying the negatives. I didn't like hate the album, but it certainly is not what I would call a good album that I enjoyed listening to.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mind it. That was
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah, like I'm going to be honest with you, for very different reasons. Like I equate this to Love Sucks in terms of my enjoyment level throughout the album.
Sure.
As in like I didn't enjoy either one, but I
Yeah.
get where each one of them I get where they're coming from.
Sure.
The only other thing for this album is I was not expecting to know a single song, except I was expecting to know one Social Distortion song.
Yeah.
And I knew a song on this album.
Really.
And I could not for the life of me understand why I knew it. I sat there like listening to it, and as I'm listening, I'm like, why do I know this? And I know it like I know the words to it, which means I've listened to it a lot.
What?
And then I realized that the title track, Mommy's Little Monster, was on Tony Hawk's Underground. And I played that game a lot.
Okay.
I really liked that
I
game.
mean, that is the correct aesthetic.
Yes,
That
it
is
very
correct.
much is.
Yeah.
So that's why I knew the song. And as
Okay.
soon as it thankfully, when I went and did the wiki research on this, that was right underneath the track listing. That and
Okay.
it clicked in my brain, and you know that relief when like something finally makes sense to you.
Yes.
That happened, and I was like, ah,
Mhm.
the euphoria of knowledge.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'll move on to Social Distortion, the eponymous album. And here's what I'm going to say. This is not my jam personally. In terms of like this is not
Mhm.
music that I like love to listen to. Like we've been around long enough. We know what kind of music I like. I know what kind of music you like.
Mhm.
However, comparing this album to the first album, this is like 8 steps up.
Yeah, it's significant growth.
It's significant growth. It's significantly better. The only thing that I wish didn't happen is I wish they forgot to put the cover of Ring of Fire on it, because I didn't love the cover of Ring of Fire. I
Mm.
didn't think Ring of Fire needed to be punked up.
Okay.
I appreciate the attempt, and I
Okay.
don't dislike the artistic decision,
Mhm.
but like I much prefer the original. We'll say.
Sure. Understandable. I
Uh,
also prefer the original.
and by
To
the
be
original, I do. I'm to any like real music sticklers. I mean the Johnny
Johnny Cash.
Cash cover, like Johnny Cash version of it,
Yeah.
not the original June Carter
Carter.
Cash.
Yeah.
Just I know there's one person will listen to this 10 years from now and be like, "Excuse me?" And no.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, I mean, listen, it's much better. Obviously, here's where you get Story of My Life. Uh it's an enjoyable album for an album that I don't enjoy the genre too much.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely not definitely the kind of thing that I would often listen to, but I heard a lot of songwriting maturity compared to the first record. I heard a much more polished sound than the first record. I heard the things in this album that I liked about the first record, as in the multiple guitar parts that are done well, the fact that they're more interested in melodic playing than in just like kind of simple heaviness that can often happen in punk rock. Like again, the rock really shines through the punk even more and more on this record, and that those are the things that make it good. Uh, the questionable thing that I had here is again, I still don't think that they're mixing the bass well. Like I feel like these tracks are really missing out on some low end, unfortunately, for like
Yeah.
everything the guitar adds. I'm
New
like,
bassist too.
is is there bass? Is there
Well,
bass on
there's a
these
credited
songs?
bassist and
Yeah,
he's new.
right.
They
But
replaced
it's
their
just
whole
so low.
rhythm section between albums.
Yes, that's true. It's really uh, at the heart of it, a Mike Ness and Dennis Danell um, enterprise, I suppose. But we'll talk more about those two later.
Yeah.
Um, but I actually I'm like of two minds about the Ring of Fire cover because I also took notes on because one, I mean, let's just be again like the vocals are not good on it. Like they
No.
really suffer. But what they did with the arrangement relative to the original song, based on what they did, I thought it was a really good and creative arrangement for their band. Like,
Sure.
I really respected what they did with the music of it a lot.
Yeah, and
Uh,
listen, I wanna be clear, I'm with you. I'm with you, it was creative, they made it sound like a Social Distortion song,
yeah,
but I love the original song I'm
sure,
sorry, the Johnny Cash song the version so much that, like, I don't want that.
sure.
Like, there are some songs where it's like, even though I love it, I like when it's taken in a new direction. This was n
Yeah,
not one of them, and you don't know until you hear it, right? Like, I wouldn't have I
exactly.
looked at this and I saw that and was excited,
Mhm.
'cause I was like, "Oh, cool, like, they're gonna do that," and
Yeah.
they did a good job, and it was one of those things where it's like, "You did good enough that I realized I didn't want this. Go ahead and
That's
just
fair.
not want this."
Yeah. I think if somebody else who was really good sang it, I would really like it. That's what I
Maybe.
think. But anyway, I'm gonna move on to Hard Times and Nursery Rhymes. And at this point, I don't know why punk rock is still like the first listed genre. Like
Yeah.
this is fully just a rock album.
Yeah.
Um, and so like reading the band's um like their influences and the other things that so they've been described as punk rock, something called cowpunk, which combines punk rock with new wave, but with also country, folk, and blues sounds. And I'm like,
That's
now
just
that's
music.
starting to make sense.
Yeah,
Like,
you're that's just,
yeah,
"Oh, look, it incorporates elements of other genres into one genre." That's
yeah,
just
sure.
when you get to, like, more than 3 genres you're combining, you're just general music at that point.
I get that. But that, like, looking down and seeing, like, okay, they're influenced. They list Johnny Cash. They list Hank Williams. They list
Yeah.
Bob Dylan, Eddie Cochran. They list, artists like that, The Clash, even still. And I'm like, "Okay, I'm starting to get, like, a much fuller picture." This group is like, they're kind of placed in punk because that's one of the main genres that, like, sort of carried them through a lot of their career, but there's a lot more depth to what they are than that. I think this is the best album vocally, which is probably the result of some studio magic, I would imagine. Maybe some voice
Yeah.
lessons, maybe.
Maybe.
But it definitely sounds the best vocally, and I think overall it was the strongest and my favorite, of their 3 albums. It kind of reminded me to throw some other artists that we've discussed, sort of some elements of, like, pop punk in there, almost like a Blink-182 influence a tiny bit, but also, like, that alternative rock sound of, like, a Matthew Sweet, who we talked about a season or so ago, I think influences
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I get
I
that.
also I really like the opening instrumental song. I thought that was really good. I think it was their first instrumental they ever wrote. I think they did a nice job with it. I also like the addition in a few places of female vocalists.
Yeah.
Um, I thought that added to what they were doing here. And one of the songs was actually a Hank Williams cover, "Alone and Forsaken." But overall, I think this is a group that's gotten better with every album as they've gotten further and further away from being labeled punk. And this is definitively a good album. Like, I enjoyed listening to this.
Yeah, listen, this is definitely my favorite of the three. Uh, I enjoyed the other voices coming in. I definitely think I heard some production in Mike Ness's voice.
Yeah.
Just like as soon as he started singing and it was significantly better,
Mhm.
I was like, okay, let me start listening for the telltale signs. For anybody who doesn't know, you can really hear auto tune on like the changes in pitch.
Mhm.
If you're not auto tuned, like those changes will always sound slightly imperfect, which is what makes a unique voice sound.
Yeah.
So auto tune is like it perfects that. Which is fine. I mean, I get it, and
Sure.
but like you can hear like, if you really listen into when like any type of movement happens in a voice, when it's just like walking down a flight of stairs instead of like sliding on a slide, it's typically auto tune.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of the stuff that you said with I agree. I'm not gonna harp too much. I thought that for the most part, again, I agree with you. I don't know why this is called punk at
Yeah.
all. This is a rock album.
Yeah.
And it's a good rock album.
It is.
And I enjoyed the covers on this one, maybe because I knew the songs a little less. Alone and Forsaken. I mean,
Mhm.
the only other thing that I'll say, and this is, I don't think this is what you have as your 6 degrees,
Sure.
but
It's
goddamn,
probably
can we
not.
not escape Josh Freese?
Yeah, you're right.
I don't mind him. He's
No, not
he's
at all.
great, but I just every time I'm like when I least expect to see his name somewhere, I'm like, oh
Dude
shit,
is
Josh Freese is on the drums on
working.
this. Yeah,
He is
he's a busy
working a
man.
lot.
I wonder if he's gonna still work as hard now that he's the full time drummer for Foo
Yeah,
Fighters.
who knows?
Is
He's
he
still
gonna
gonna
still
be
be
on,
in
like,
1,100 other
10,000 albums
albums?
a year, yeah. Alright, let me talk about Social Distortion then.
Do it.
Take what I can find. So I'll start with the 6 Degrees because you mentioned Josh Freese, but he is actually not the only drummer who's ever been in this band that has been in other bands that we've talked about. Because there was a time, and I had to pick him because of his name. There was a time, a short period, where the drummer of this band was Chuck Biscuits, originally, of course, from Danzig.
Chuck Biscuits.
Chuck Biscuits
Yes.
was in this group.
The best
Yes.
part of Danzig, Chuck Biscuits.
Yes. And now, if you really want to deep dive on the 6 Degrees, so
Oh
their
no.
current bassist is a guy named Brent Harding, who
Yeah.
played on a bunch of records by a guy who I saw his name at first and I knew it, but I wasn't 100% sure why I knew it was related to the podcast. But he played on a bunch of Deke Dickerson records. Do you
Yeah.
remember why Deke Dickerson was on the podcast?
Oh god, dude. No, I don't.
Okay.
But I remember the
So,
name. Like I'm having the
yeah,
familiarity sound
when
of
we covered the Trashmen, their most recent album was done with
was
Deke
done with
Dickerson.
Deke
It
Dickerson.
was Deke Dickerson
Yes.
and the Trashmen, yeah. So,
Wow.
yep. So there are those little connections. What I put for their unique thing was just to me the fact that they're called a punk band, but I heard so much more rock, blues, and country over the course of the 3 albums that we listened to than anything that I would ever consider like calling a punk band.
Yeah.
I think they just incorporate so much rock, blues, country influence in what they're doing that it gives them a very unique sound for a band that is punk. And I'm gonna go
Sure.
their highlight. Uh, uh, I couldn't come up with much here. I just picked their 2 album gold stretch, Social Distortion and the album that came afterwards, Somewhere Between Heaven and Hell. Both went gold for them. Both of those albums had, singles that charted decently for them. At least on the alternative charts, they managed um, 6 top 40 hits on the alternative charts between those 2 records. So that was probably the highlight of their career, right in that early '90s time.
Yeah, that
Their
sounds
low
right.
light, they're two. So I did mention
I
that
know
the
one of them.
the main stays of this band are Dennis Donnell and Mike Ness. Dennis Donnell unfortunately died from a brain aneurysm. Um,
Yeah.
And the other one is actually a lot more recent because uh, just this year in June 7th, 2023, Mike
Oh.
Ness announced um, they had to postpone their tour because he has been diagnosed with tonsil cancer.
Oh,
Um,
geez.
yeah, he is, as at least as of my last reading, expected to be totally fine. It shouldn't be something that they can't take care of right away, but it is gonna, stop them from touring for at least a little while he's recovering from that.
Yeah. I mean, luckily with tonsil cancer, as long as it hasn't metastasized, you can just remove the whole tonsil.
Right, exactly. They are not necessary.
Yeah.
And then for the meanest, nicest thing, I mean, all I could really find was the band is super supportive of a bunch of charities. Like I found like several animal rights charities, several environmental protection charities, Amnesty International. They seem to be really involved with charity work for a lot of causes that are important to them.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love to see it. Love to hear it.
So all good on that front.
I love that our questions have kind of formed themselves into areas.
Sure.
So like the nicest thing typically becomes like, thankfully, like let's talk about charity
Yeah.
because that's great. I like that'll be like a day when I will really feel like we've made it as a band when like we can
Mm,
have like
sure.
a charity
That would
thing.
be great.
I would love to do like a charity festival.
That would be
If we
incredible.
could figure
Yeah.
that out, like we could
Hell yeah.
headline and like run a like low totem gives or something.
Oh, absolutely.
It'd be great.
Absolutely.
If only I knew an event planner, I marry
Yeah.
one.
Well, I think it's time for grades, Patrick.
Oh yeah. Oh, and you ready for this? You ready for what my
Mhm.
brain forced me to do one
Go
night?
ahead.
Ready? Hold on. Let me get rid of the captions, which anybody who's not watching the video has never seen. Bam.
Wow, look at
I'm
you.
ready. Ready for us to talk about final scores, Nick.
Okay. So let's talk cultural impact. Let's talk Avril Lavigne. She's pretty famous, I would say. I think
Yeah,
she's gonna get a solid score here. I'm sure you
she is
won't
in
argue.
fact famous. Yeah, she's a complete household name. Uh you know, Let Go is an extremely successful album. I think she's been relatively influential as well as accepting and perpetuating influence from like previous times. She's definitely kept the spirit of a lot of things alive in terms of her music. I'm pretty comfortable giving her a decent score here. I
When
mean,
you
she's
say a
not like
decent score,
listen, we'll eliminate the tens, we'll eliminate the nines, we'll eliminate the eights.
I agree with all that so far.
I think when we get to
I
the
agree that we can
sevens,
eliminate anything under 5.
I would agree with you there too.
Mhm.
So we're talking in between 5 and 7,
Mhm.
I think is where she could land. And that just kind of
Then we're in
depends
the
on,
same.
yeah,
I mean, I'd be okay if it was, like, kinda right between
like a 6.
in that area, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could go in the sixes. I just want to be, I could see her going higher than that just because of like the multitude of things she's done. I mean, she's been in like film and TV shows as well, which, not hugely, but she's been in them. So
Yeah, I'm
that's part of
curious.
it. She was on an episode of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I remember that. I will never forget that. But she's been in a few things like that. Like she's been in culture in various ways, like high profile marriages and other than just her music. So like I think that she's also credited as one of the influences for people like a band like Paramore or Hey Monday, which is there may not be the biggest bands, but they're decent. I mean, Paramore's a
Sure.
big band.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So I just want to be clear. Those are all things. Other people who have cited her as an influence are Baby Rexha, Billie Eilish, 5 Seconds of Summer. Ed Sheeran has pulled from her influence previously. So like she's been around long enough
Sure.
that people have been influenced by her.
Absolutely. What do you want?
I think. Listen, I'm not arguing too high, but I think maybe like a 6.7.
All right. I'll let you have it.
Yeah, because I think she's not in the sevens. I don't think, especially since she's only been around for about 20ish years,
Yeah.
and I think a little
I
bit more
also
than that.
feel like you just have to be like pushing the art form a little bit more in
Sure,
conjunction with fame to and I think that's where maybe she lacks a little bit.
I understand, and
Um,
I won't argue.
Social Distortion, I mean, they have their 2 gold records. They had their time of popularity. They had the popularity of Story of My Life because of Guitar Hero, if we're being
You
honest. That was
swine! It was Rock Band.
Good Story of My Life was absolutely in Guitar Hero.
It
I'm
was.
gonna look at it right
It might
now.
have also been in Rock Band. I remember it from Rock Band.
Yes, but it was
I remember
also
singing it, which is why I know it was Rock Band.
okay, so it was
But it
Rock
might have
Band
been in
2, but
both.
It was Guitar Hero 3. It
Okay.
was Guitar Hero 3, so
Yeah, I was like, I.
yeah.
The only reason I know that is because I was shockingly always the one forced to sing, even though
Yeah, who
at
would
the
have guessed?
time I was a better Rock Band guitar player
Of
than
course.
our guitar player for our fake band.
Ugh. But, I mean, that's pretty much what they are. I mean, they're in their niche. They are what they are. It's not a particularly high number, but they did have success. They did chart quite a bit on the alternative wave, so they're not nobody either. I
Yeah.
mean, eh, to get on the alternative airplay, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 top 40 hits, with the lowest of those being a 33, most of them being in the top 20. Like, that's not nothing either. I think they can scrape together a point or 2.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I was kind of like clenching a little bit because I'm like, is he gonna start arguing like a 4, which I can't
No.
allow. But yeah, I could give him like a 2. I think that would
Yeah,
work.
that's all I think.
Yeah. 1 point for the hit and then 1 point for the rest of their career
Yes.
combined. Perfect.
So we are talking about 2 artists who both have 7 albums. So I'm going to go ahead and start them both at a 5.2, and then we'll discuss each one.
Sure. Do you want to continue with Avril first, or do you want to?
Yes, of course.
Okay,
So
so
she
Avril
has 40
Lavigne.
million album sales.
Yeah, she's sold a few.
Yes,
40
not
million
including
album sales.
singles, 40 million straight album sales. I'm fine with giving her the full half point because of singles too. I would
Yeah,
definitely not give her any less than a full half point.
and I think a full half point is definitely comfortable. I'm totally
Yeah.
fine
I,
with that.
okay. I mean, I wouldn't even mind going a little higher because of the single sales, but
Well, I'm looking at them right now. Let me take a look.
they're pretty
So,
significant, if I'm being honest with you.
oh my gosh, they are very significant.
They're pretty significant.
Oh yeah, because I was thinking about what we had covered.
Mhm.
I completely forgot about Girlfriend.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
we might want to give her more.
I don't count
Girlfriend itself
singles
sold
nearly
7
as
million.
right, and I don't count those nearly as I don't value them nearly as much as I value albums in this
Sure.
particular, uh, format, but I give her an extra point too. I take her all the way up to a 5.9.
Yeah, I mean, just between her like three biggest, we're talking another like 15 million in sales.
Yeah.
And there's just more that keep going.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that.
So it's a 5.9,
Yep.
and then you get to do with that whatever you want.
Listen, man, I really enjoyed the first album. I thought the second album had moments, and I thought the third album, while not something I enjoyed, I certainly understood. And for that reason, I'm not going to take any points away for it.
Sure.
I know you might take away for the lyrics, and I won't knock you if you do, but I personally am not going to do that. Except understand that if I really wanted to, I would take all the points away for Avalanche.
Yes.
I like
Truly a negative point 0.5 word.
like truly a terrible thing that happened. But I'm gonna give her point two.
Okay. So that's a 6.1. I will give her absolutely nothing at all in either direction.
Okay.
That's how I feel. That
Hey.
is me being very nice about the first 2 albums. So nothing. Social Distortion stays where they're at. They've had 2 American Golds, which qualifies them to not
to not
lose
move down.
points. I'm gonna give them, like a point 0.1 because I generally enjoyed the second 2 albums and I didn't mind the first one. So I will push them to a 5.3.
Oh man. See, here's my struggle now. I was thinking about giving them a 0.1. Okay.
And
However, you just quantified the scale by your descriptors
okay.
and appropriating your same scale. I have to just go even with them because I did not enjoy them as much as you did.
Sure.
I was more mid on the second album, more negative on the first album. So I will just give them even.
Fair enough. And we're moving on to instrumental talent. I mean, we talked Avril's got a good voice. I definitely didn't really understand the knocks on her for that. I will say I'm a little bit disappointed with the fact that she has not played on as many of her tracks as I would like.
Sure.
She definitely is like comes across as or presents herself as a singer guitarist. At most, she's like playing on maybe 1 track per album, actual guitar, which is to me, it's a little disappointing. What
Yeah.
that means when a big artist is not the one who is actually tracking the instruments on their songs, it means that they're not strong enough in studio to get that, and they're bringing in studio musicians to do it for them. I don't love
Yeah.
that.
Wasn't
I'm not
all
not to
valid.
kill I wouldn't kill her at all here, like, I'm not
Yeah.
talking about
Well, you
low
can't. She's
grade.
already dead, according to
Yeah,
the
that's
theory.
true, long dead. But I I'm, like, still, like, closer around a 5-ish. Like, I wouldn't mind going a little bit over for the quality of her voice, but I'm not going as over as I would if she had actually contributed a little bit more instrumentally to the records.
And I'm in the same boat. My score for this was a 5.2. I thought she was a little above average. I agree with you that for somebody who I thought of as a singer guitarist,
Right, because that's the way
uh,
she's presented, and that's the problem.
right.
It's like if you present yourself that way when, like, Adele presents herself, she is just a vocalist, and then you
Yeah.
find out that she also contributes other instruments to the records, and that is an added bonus. Some artists present themselves as singer
Yeah.
instrumentalists, and if they're not actually playing the instruments on the albums, then it becomes a detriment.
Yeah. So I'm fine with the 5.2. So if you want to,
Yeah, I mean, for me, Social Distortion, here's what it evens out to. I heard enough from the guitars to cancel out the bad vocals, and I would sit at a 5.
so a 5.1.
You're a 5.1?
Well, I had said a 5.2. You said you were at a 5. Is
Oh,
that
I
what I?
thought you were saying that about Avril.
Oh gosh.
I was
I'm gonna be
saying,
honest
oh,
with
I
you.
gave you the 5 too. I was talking
You
about
Yeah. So
sorry.
you broke up for a minute there,
Gotcha.
and in my brain, I went, I have to use Nick's backup audio for
Gotcha.
part of this.
Okay.
And then you came back in
Yeah.
talking about a completely different
Gotcha. Okay,
artist.
no, I gave Avril the 5 too, and then I just made my case for Social Distortion getting the 5. Like, I heard enough on guitar to cancel out the bad vocals, and it's just average to me.
You know why this is great for 2 reasons.
Go ahead.
One, I'm in a similar boat. I had him at a 4.9, but I'll give you the
Okay.
5. Just because the vocals are bad, but I'll give
Yeah.
you the 5 for the rest of the stuff. But now because we discussed your bad audio in the episode, I can leave it.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a
And you
problem.
repeated yourself, so I can doubly just
Yeah.
leave it.
Oh,
It's
it's all
great.
good.
Great
Don't
for
worry.
me.
Yes. Alright, songwriting. I
Okay.
don't think we're talking great here for Avril. I don't think we're talking bad either, but I don't think we're talking particularly good.
Here's what I want to say. She contributes on almost every single I think she contributes on every song.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
And she's the only writer on a few of
here's
them,
the thing.
and she's heavily involved in the writing process, which a lot of pop centric artists are not.
I mean, it's like that's the issue in and of itself. And immediately it's like, well, it's not like she didn't write her songs.
Sure.
That's not a great place to start from because like Social Distortion obviously wrote all their songs and arranged all their songs and like that's what that should kind of be the default. And I was just kind of like putting aside the fact that Avril has help on a lot of these songs. Like, I think there's ups, I think there's downs. I think at the end of the day, she's kind of just like a right in the middle songwriter. Like, she does some things that are good and interesting, and she does some things that are a little bit more questionable or a little
Sure.
plainer or a little just, going with the trends poppier.
One thing that I want to comment on, a little fun factoid
Mhm.
about her writing
Sure.
is she actually originally wrote the song Breakaway by Kelly Clarkson
Oh, okay. I could
for
see that.
herself. Like
I
that was
could see
originally
that.
she wrote and recorded a demo of it, and then like it didn't fit the vibe of Let Go, which is
Okay.
what she was working on at the time because it was came out in 2001, or she wrote the song in 2001. So she passed it to new American Idol winner Kelly Clarkson,
Huh, that's
who
cool.
it became one of her biggest songs.
Yeah,
So just a fun little fact of like
it is fun.
one of Kelly Clarkson's biggest songs was written by Avril Lavigne,
Very fun.
which is ironic because I know they have like some history of beefage, I believe, at some
Oh, I
point.
had no idea.
Nothing like major apparently,
Yeah.
but like some light jabs.
Okay. All right. At the end of the I mean, look, you tell me what score you want, but you're not talking me out of the middle range here.
No, and I'm right in the middle range too. I'm not talking anything high. I would say like again like a 5-1 ish would be totally fine for me. I think it is slightly above average in like aggregate.
You got it. 5-1. Now, I do believe, however, that this is Social Distortion's best category as a group because they have shown themselves to pull from 4 or 5 different backgrounds at once. And I think that one thing that they do incredibly well as a group is write for 2 guitars. Uh,
Okay.
eh, I definitely don't think that they're, like, at the highest end of this, but I think that they do both the genre blending and the 2 guitar writing, at significantly above average rates. Like, I'm definitely in the 5s, maybe closer to, like, the 5.5, 5.6 range here.
I think that's a good spot to be. I do question some of the songwriting, like the fact that the bass typically gets lost in the song.
But I don't know
Is
if
that
that's writing or if it's production. Like, I don't know if they
I
just had bad production, and I also didn't notice it on the 3rd album at all. Like, I felt like
yeah,
the bass was there.
sure, they might have corrected the problem, another new bassist as well.
Yeah.
I that's like my only like real question
I mean, it
other
was the thing
than
I had the most trouble with for sure,
yeah.
in the mix.
But
It was
I'm
just the
fine with
lack
the
of
score you're giving. I'm
yeah.
not gonna argue you down. 5.5 works for me.
Alright, then let's talk poetic talent. And it's just a matter of how much higher do the first 2 albums bring Avril Lavigne from the point
From the yeah.
1 that was Love Sucks? So, it might as well
Listen,
have been an instrumental album for the grade I'm giving the lyrics.
I understand. I do. I'm not gonna knock you for not liking the lyrics on that
Yeah.
album. I do think that Avril Lavigne throughout her career has shown a maturity, which is ironic because of the last
Yeah,
album we
because
listened to.
she, like, has
But
she's Benjamin Buttoning.
it's like, but realistically, like when she's 17 and writing her like high school anthems, but they have like a lyrical and emotional depth to them that was like charming and like
Sure.
kept me involved and is one of those things that like I wasn't fully expecting because like I know Complicated and I know Skater Boy and I know a couple other Avril Lavigne songs, but I know them through the lens of nostalgia. So
Mhm.
actually like listening to the lyrics, I was like, wow, there's actual substance here.
Right. I agree
So
with that fully.
I do agree with you that the last album is a knock on the door
Yeah.
of, you know, absolute not great.
Yeah.
But I think we'd have to give her a decent score here.
Okay.
I mean, especially for like the realm she's living in, I have to give her a decent score. Again, I'm not out of average range for to
Definitely
be
not.
clear. But I think I think realistically giving her like in between a 5 and a 5.5 somewhere is where I would want to be. Accounting for the third album.
Okay. Because I would have been maybe, floating around the 5.5 range for the first couple albums and would have been fine with that. and I am like probably a 1 for the 3rd album, and I'm not saying that
Mm,
that deserves to
yeah.
average the other ones down to, like, a 3 or anything like that.
Right, there's also 4 other albums we
Right,
did not
and
listen to.
right, and who knows what the hell's on those things. Uh,
Well, I know there's a song called Hello Kitty
and I also know "Girlfriend," which you mentioned
and
earlier. The
Girlfriend.
lyrics on that are not particularly deep either, my friend.
Correct, correct.
Um, I'm struggling to go past the 5.
Alright, so how about this? I'll sit at a 5.3 and average out to wherever you wanna go.
Okay. Uh,
So if you
I'll
wanna go a 5 or a little bit below a 5, whatever.
I'll give you the 5-1 because you've made your case for the cup, but, like, I cannot go higher than that because
And that's
some of
totally
the stuff
fine.
is so bad.
That's totally fine, dude,
Yeah, like,
seriously.
for someone to get a 5-1 after having one of the worst lyrical records we've ever listened to,
Yeah, it's bad. I
I
mean,
mean,
seriously, it's bad.
like, I'm not exaggerating.
No.
Social Distortion, I mean, like, a lot of the stuff on their lyrics, it didn't necessarily get in my way, of
Yeah.
enjoying it, and it didn't do too much to push me in one direction or another. Like, I didn't think that it was necessarily overtly bad. Like, sometimes punk is just, like, overly
No.
simplified to some extent, but they don't really fall victim to that. I mean, the famous one, "Story of My Life," like, it actually does kind of have narrative to it, like, there's something going on there. Um, and I think that's pretty much like that level of narrative is the best that you're gonna get from this group. It's pretty much always just solid to me. Like, again, I'm not really far off from where we were for Avril.
Right, and I think it's the tale of 2 completely different scores here,
Yeah,
but it's roughly the same score. 5.51 is totally fine to write
I'm
down.
gonna give him the 5-1.
Yeah, and it totally comes down to absolute average mediocrity, and I don't mean that as an insult.
Yeah,
All of the albums were mediocre lyrically, so therefore they get a mediocre score.
yeah.
X Factor.
I mean, I got nothing for Social Distortion, so I'm just gonna put the 0 in.
Okay, cool. I have a couple things for Avril.
Go ahead.
So I did mention one. I mentioned the she's the first Western artist to do a full tour in China,
Mhm.
with the Best Damn Tour in 2008,
Yeah.
and is considered the biggest Western artist in Asia.
Yeah, I think that's something.
I think that's something too. And the only other thing that I really had, obviously, she's been nominated and won multiple awards throughout her career. We could discuss them. I'm fine looping them into, her initial cultural impact. I don't think she's at this point in her career won an award that's X Factor worthy. Like, I don't see like lifetime achievement awards yet from her or things like that.
Yeah.
But she did hold the Guinness World Record for a time as the youngest female artist to ever top the UK charts at
Oh, that's
18 years and
interesting.
106 days. She was eventually dethroned in 2004 by Joss Stone,
Interesting.
but she was a Guinness World Record holder at a time for a time. I thought that was also an interesting little fact.
Hmm, okay, that's cool.
I don't think it holds as much weight as the Asia
Yeah,
China selling thing, but it's something. Maybe
that's
like a
cool.
little
Yeah,
point one on the end there.
sure.
I think the China art. I mean, I could see that being a point.
Sure.
Realistically,
Yeah,
that seems like a point worthy.
I don't have any issue with it.
Yeah. So I guess a 1.1
Okay.
for Avril.
You got it, and I've got final scores, but one thing I wanna say now, this is not confirmed because she apparently, like, will not say this in public, although it's heavily speculated. I believe that both Avril Lavigne and Mike Ness are fellow vegetarians.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Well,
Well, there you
thanks for
go.
being in the club, guys. Great to see you here. Alright, and now I've got
Get old
final scores.
vegetarians.
Well, I
Like
know
I
Mike
got
Ness is, but Avril is, like, kind of the one that's
yeah.
speculated about, but she won't talk about it in public.
I got nothing against vegetarians. I just couldn't do it.
Well, here's our final scores, and winning this week
Whammadabadabadabow.
is Avril Lavigne with a 29.3.
Okay, expected.
Yeah,
Expected, honestly.
expected, and Social Distortion, in 2nd place with a 22.9. I think a solid showing for them.
Sure. And I mean a more enjoyable week than I may have expected going into it.
Sure.
I honestly I thought this week was going to be like kind of shit, and like I thought it was going to be one of those things where it was like I have a lot of like deep seated nostalgia for some of these songs from Avril Lavigne. And it's like sometimes revisiting them as like an adult and doing a critical dive of them
It can
hurts
be
a little
not
bit.
rewarding.
Yeah, it can really like disillusion you to the
Yeah.
artist. But that totally didn't happen. If anything, it strengthened my resolve for my enjoyment of her early work.
Yes, and only early work.
Correct. Yeah, we agree, but
All right. Stay tuned next week. We are gonna put up two three-piece bands, two power trios. They both were fronted by uh gentlemen who are part of a very fortunate club. These band albums before they moved on. So do with that information what you will.
yes, and I can see you doing your P dance.
That's correct. I do have to be.
Before you do your P dance, I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody and do the outro here.
Of course.
Leave, like completely leave the
Roger.
call because
You
you're
got it, buddy.
lagging.
Okay, bye.
Cool. All right, so we're gonna sign out for this episode. If you're part of our live audience, stick around. And if you're not part of our live audience and just listening on audio and have no idea what I'm talking about, you're missing the boat. We record live. We try to do every Thursday. We try to start at around 5 to 5:30 Eastern. That's kind of our go-to. And you're missing out if you're not a part of it. So other than that, hang out, join us, tune in next week, and please, please have a great day. Boom, we did it. That's an episode, people, and we're going to be doing a second episode pretty much right now to make up for not having an episode last week. So if you're hanging out with us, continue to hang out, please. And I'll just wait for Nick to come back. I don't know if he was lagging in the stream for anybody in the stream. I don't know. I see two people. I know you're here, Keith. You might be just kind of having it up for support, which I appreciate. But I see a second viewer, which is an absolute hello to you, second viewer. Please feel free to comment. I know we don't talk too much during the stream because we're recording it to release as a podcast, but we very much appreciate anybody being around. Yeah, I knew you would put excuse me. I saw the little blue thing pop up for a chat, and I'm like, Keith just said excuse me when I talked about Ring of Fire. I know he did. But yeah, if you're he was lagging real bad for me for most of that episode, so I assume he was lagging for y'all as well. Because I can see that my bar is all green and his bar was in the lower yellow. So hopefully a nice quick refresh will fix that right up. Oh, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna get ready for this, and I'm going to start to pull up my notes, which is smart to do because I usually forget to do that. Yimmy Yendrick. Oh, I just said okay. I just said nice things about a second viewer, and then we went back down to one viewer. So, oh well. That's kind of funny, but oh well. All right. Wow, the similarities between these two is kind of crazy. He joined the army. Interesting stuff. Here, you know what I can do? Here, I'll get this going in the interim here. If it plays. There we go. Yeah, guys. I mean, good right now. Oh man. Hopefully everybody's having a good week this week. I feel like, once you get to like even though, I mean, honestly, I've been out of school for years at this point, and I still get like, once you start to get to the end of July, like it just feels like summer's starting to wind down. Like you get that whole feeling of like the going back to school feeling, even though like I'm not, like nothing changes for me. I work, 40 hours a week. So if anything, realistically, like the only thing that changes for me is I get less busy because like the band's our busy time is the summer. So I get less busy as opposed to more busy. Oh man. If anybody doesn't have this, I highly recommend getting this bottle. Big old water bottle. Very important. You may have spoken to me. You may have spoken words.
Yeah. Oh, I was
Yeah.
just trying to refill my water in my ice glass here, and all my ice maker was not working in my fridge. I had to turn it back on.
Unfortunate.
I think someone. I think someone. I think Jackie's dad put like a bag of ice in our ice this weekend, and it like jammed up the whole thing, and it turned the ice maker off. And
I get it. Well, I need to know. Did you have a snack already?
No, but I'm about to.
Okay, well, hold on. We're gonna take you off just to be safe. Back to me, and only me. I can't hear if you're talking. You have to utilize the chat if you need to speak to me until you're back on camera. I removed you from camera. Good. Now I'll put you back on camera. And now, get ready for this, Nick. I'm going to leave the camera. Wow, you could have said one word. You could have entertained our fans.
Oh no.
just sheer respective silence. Understandable. All right, well, let me kill the music here.
I listened. Sorry, Bill texted me a bunch because I sent him something earlier this morning.
Sure.
So I found just within the last few days, Rick Rubin released a 2-hour podcast conversation with John Mayer.
Oh,
and he like gets very in depth about like his life and his process and like his thoughts on create. Like it's really good. I don't know if you've ever listened to like recent-ish, like last 5 or 6 years interviews with John Mayer. Like
a couple. I listened to a couple when what's it just came out? His album.
Sobrock. Yeah, like he is so fascinating to listen to talking about music and talking about like just the process and the way he thinks. Like he is really well spoken about that stuff.
Yeah, I watched a video about how he comes up with songs and like what he does, like his process for that. And I was like very intrigued because we have very similar processes in terms of like he also struggles a little bit with when lightning doesn't strike him and when he gets like one small little snippet of a song in his head and like the rest of it's not coming and how frustrating that is for him. I was like,
100%.
Bro, I get it. And then he's like, and sometimes like a full song will just appear in my head and I'm a slave to getting it out of me as quickly as I can. I was like, dude.
And he talks a lot about like something. I always think of Bowie as an artist who does this, but like John Mayer's so good at it too. Like every few years, he just fully reinvents himself.
Yeah.
Like he was a singer-songwriter. Nah, I'm going to be like a blues guy. No, I'm going to get really into folk and put out like a couple of folk records. No, I'm gonna start playing with the Grateful Dead. I'm gonna put out like this,
Yeah.
like he's just he. There's so many avenues that he's gone down successfully.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
But
Speaking of
anyway,
being
it's
with you
it's
100%,
very much well worth the listen if you have any interest.
I will give it a listen for sure, man. I will. I'll add it to my list of things. I
And
watched
Ruben is a
this.
really good interviewer. Like he actually knows what questions to ask because he's worked with
Mhm.
so many artists.
Yeah, I had this like uh non-musical thing this week that I watched, which was it like came up on my like my recommended, which I was very surprised about. The title is not great. It's called Hot Girls Wanted Turned On.
Oh, well, that was the Rashida Jones
And it's the
documentary.
sequel to that.
Okay.
The
Well, is she still a
2015 one
part
is
of it?
called Hot Girls Wanted. Yes,
Yeah,
she's
I
still a
remember
part
that. I
of it.
remember watching that.
Right, and it was great.
Yeah.
And so the sequel is a 6-episode docuseries
Hmm.
about like various degrees. So like part of it, like it still centers on like the adult industry. Uh, but a lot of it's more in terms of like it's less exploitative and more like what people are doing to empower women in the industry
Oh, okay.
and like women in the industry empowering women in the industry. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
But it also talks about like the horror of like dating currently with the like overexposure to like dating apps and
Hmm.
swipe left, swipe right, like
Yeah.
how like just
Imagine.
yeah, and like all of that and how it like refuses to create a deeper connection to people. And it's like it was such an interesting it was like all 6 episodes like were about different things about that. And it like
Oh, I would
one of them was
definitely
about
enjoy
like
that.
women creators in the adult industry and like how vastly different it is
Mm.
that from like the mainstream. And I'll tell you, they're talking about it and they keep mentioning this one scene. And I was like, well, fuck it. I'll watch it. I'll just
Yeah,
judge.
sure.
Couldn't agree more. It
Yeah.
was like night and day, dude. It was crazy how different it was and how like the entire vibe was different.
Mm.
Because like when you're a dude, and you're especially when you're in that zone,
Yeah.
you're not necessarily thinking of the objectification of women
Sure.
until it's not there, and then
Mm.
you're like, whoa, it was
Yeah.
very interesting.
Sure.
And then one of the ones that was like really sad was the final episode was dealing with a girl from Ohio who periscoped her friend being assaulted
Mm.
and like the fallout of that, and you get to hear like the whole story and like it's worth a watch. Seriously, it's on
Yeah.
Netflix. It's worth a watch. It's one of those. It's one of those where it's like the topic is risque, but it's done in a way that
Yeah.
doesn't feel risque.
Right.
Speaking of risque, let's talk about these artists.
Yes.
I'm let me just get the video up. I am ready to go.
All right. I'm just swapping my Audacity.
Yeah,
Getting rid of the
please.
old,
You let me know when you're ready.
pulling up the new. 3. And hold on. I was counting down. Okay. That one's done. That one is exported. I can open up a new one. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Hello.
God damn it. There's so much anticipation built for what you were
I know there was so many options. I was kind of like I had choice paralysis.
Mm,
I was like, oh, I want to do so. I was like, oh, I'll do something along the Watchtower. I was like,
yeah.
no, wait, I'll do Foxy Lady. No, wait, I'll do Smells Like Tea. I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't. I can do none of them.
I understand.
Welcome in,
All right.
everybody. We got season 6, episode 15 for you coming up. and it's a doozy.
It is a doozy.
It's a doozy of an episode,
Yeah.
man. I was like, it was really funny. So, for anybody who missed last week's episode, I did mention that we skipped a week in our recording because of
Mhm.
my voice. So, Nick and I were texting, and he's like, "Oh, have you picked who you want to do? Like, who you want to do like the facts on? I haven't even looked to know who it is." And I'm like, "Dude, first off, you made the season. Second off, this is like, other than the finale, you could argue this is our biggest episode
Oh,
of the
for
season."
sure. It probably
Uh,
is.
so I was like, "Yeah, dude, I'll take Nirvana, and you can take Jimi Hendrix." You're like, "Oh Jesus, oh, it's
Well, I
that
guess you're
episode."
not gonna ask me to introduce the artist we're doing today.
No, I'm still gonna ask you.
Hmm.
I'm still gonna ask you. And we're gonna pretend I didn't say anything. So Nick,
Yeah,
you're Nick. I'm
I am.
Pat. We're Totem Talks.
That's right.
We're a music podcast. We compare and contrast two artists at a time to come up with the overall overlord of music, the greatest
That's
act
right.
of all time. And we are uniquely qualified to do that because we're two dudes who
We're
just
just guys.
like music.
Yeah.
So that's our that's
Guys
our
being
that's our
dudes.
vibe. And Nick, why don't you let us know who we're covering today?
Oh, yeah, sure. No problem. Well, we're gonna start things off with the James Marshall Hendrix Experience, and then we're gonna follow them up with Nirvana.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That
Yeah.
sounds about right.
Mhm.
So yeah, man, I'm just gonna take us right in.
Yeah,
So
let's get to it.
I will start with James Marshall Jimi Hendrix, born Johnny Allen Hendrix, was an American guitarist, songwriter, and singer. And his career was short, 1962 to 1970. And really, it's 1966 to 1970,
Yeah.
like the realistic part of his career. But
I
he was
mean, when we're
active for 8
talking
years.
about him, I mean, he was very active playing in other groups and backing up other bands, but when he was really on his own was a short period of time.
Yeah, that is correct. Now we are in fact covering the Jimi Hendrix Experience,
Correct.
which was 1966 to 1970.
Right, and
But
the
you
albums
can't
were
have
67 and 68, and that was
yeah,
it, you know?
you can't have one without the other.
Right.
Like it's the Jimi Hendrix Experience, but it's Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
So we did cover 3 albums, and it was all 3 albums. So we started with Are You Experience, which came out in 1967. We followed that up with Axis Bold as Love, also from 1967. And then we wrapped it up with Electric Ladyland from 1968.
And I will get started.
And you
So,
will.
fun fact about this episode, we talked about this a little bit earlier. This
Yeah.
is the first and probably only time in the history of Totem Talks where both of us already knew every single album we were going to be covering this
Yeah.
week. So,
Yeah. I
it was just
mentioned
like
that we were
catching
on the
up.
phone
Yeah.
earlier, and I was like, I don't think this has ever happened or will ever happen again. That I've
Mhm.
listened to. And it wasn't just every episode, it wasn't every album we've covered. I
Right.
was like, it's probably the only time that I'll have listened to every album both artists have ever
Right.
released,
Yeah, exactly.
which
Like,
is
even when
crazy.
we get to artists that, like, I know really well, like, later, but, most of the time, like, there's 1 or 2 albums that you're missing or something like that, or you
Sure.
you listen to all their stuff from, like, the prominent decade, but not
Yeah.
what they just put out. But anyway, I'll get into RU Experience, and just to be clear, because I'm an American, now, I listen to the North American edition. There for all these albums, there's a UK edition and an American edition. So I'm going to be talking about the American edition, and holy shit, is this thing loaded with hits. I mean, like, so many of the most famous Hendrix songs. Purple Haze, Manic Depression, Hey Joe, The Wind Cries Mary, Fire, Foxy Lady. I mean, like, huge songs for him
Yeah.
on this record, and all of them are great. Uh, I mean, this album is ranked at number 30 on Rolling Stone's top 500 albums of all time. 4 of the tracks from this record are in their top 500 songs of all time. And like, just listen, it's so obviously groundbreaking in style and the sound that comes from this record. The influence of this album on guitar is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. I mean, It's terrific. Like the album is terrific. Jimmy is terrific. Mitch Mitchell, who maybe gets a little overlooked just because of how good Jimmy is terrific. I, uh, there's good songwriting in here too. Uh, this album has, I mean, like it definitely deserves its spot in the top 50 albums of all time, like Rolling Stone has placed it. Um, I mean, you couldn't really ask for much stronger of a debut album from an artist. And obviously, like the critical acclaim, not just from Rolling Stone, but from everywhere, supports that. It's
Yeah, people seem to enjoy this
bass of
album.
guitar for sure, music in general, but definitely guitar.
Yeah. Cool. Listen, man. Here's what I'll start off before we get into the music. Jimi Hendrix like vocally disliked the UK album cover
Mm.
and commissioned the American album cover, which is the
Which is better.
yellow,
Yeah.
which is the yellow with him in the scar. Yeah, the
It's
whole
funny you said
look.
that because I actually have notes on his second 2 albums about, like, Hendrix's dislike for the album covers.
Sure.
He didn't like any of the album covers he got stuck with, apparently.
Yeah, he apparently didn't, but the first album cover like is super boring.
I agree. The
The
second one's
UK
very
cover
good.
and the great one. The second one is very much the vibe that
Yeah.
he is known for.
Mhm.
I mean, what is there really to say musically here? It opens with Purple Haze, certified banger, guaranteed.
Oh, yeah.
The North American version. We listened to the
Yes.
same version.
Mhm.
And the whole album just kind of continues on that path of strength to strength. I think for me, the most interesting part of this album was just right out of the gate the maturity of sound you get from Hendrix
And I think that
and
goes to
from
show,
the
like, what
whole
we were saying, like,
band.
he has played in so many other bands. He's really
Yeah.
cut his teeth at this point before.
Yeah, I mean, he'd been like a working session musician at
Yeah.
times, and like, he'd been around the block, even though he's still quite young
Yeah.
at this point.
Mhm.
I mean,
Oh,
he's
for
not
sure.
obviously he was very young. He, passed away at 27, but he's very young at this point still, and still feels like there feels like nuance and like it incorporates a lot of restraint. I think that's the biggest part that I was enjoying from him because he's such a like a lauded and talented guitarist. The dude can wail and the dude can
Mhm.
shred when it's required. But even at a young age, it's like he knew that sometimes it's better to leave gaps.
100%.
And like it's sometimes like the silence of a song is just as important as like filling it with noise. And that really stuck
Absolutely.
out to me on a lot of these. And in fact, the only two songs that I have in my like I write green songs and red songs.
Okay.
The only two songs I wrote in the red were both songs that I felt didn't do that
Interesting.
enough. So the
I'm
songs that I love,
curious, yeah. Which ones you had in the red? I really wanna know.
yeah, I have two, and I'll talk about it. But so of course I have Purple Haze, and I also have Hey Joe and Foxy Lady, and my like green. They're my top three of the album.
Interesting, okay.
I really enjoy all three of them. I think you could argue The Wind Cries Mary or Fire. Like you could argue
You haven't mentioned my
90% of the
favorite.
songs. Which one is
Manic
yours?
Depression is my favorite.
Sure.
I
Which I mean,
love Manic Depression.
that makes a lot of sense, and that is not one of the ones in my red. Don't worry.
Okay, good.
But,
That's what I
but
needed to hear.
there are so many of them that you could put in the green. I picked those three because I personally enjoy listening to them the most. So like I try to when there's this many choices, it's like which ones do I want to listen to more? And then the only ones I have in the red are I have Love or Confusion
Okay.
because I felt like out of all of the songs on the album, for somebody that I just said really takes his time and feels nuanced, that song felt rushed to me. It felt like it was like pushing a little too fast.
Okay.
And I was like, that's it, it's the first time that I've noticed a kind of chink in the armor.
Okay.
And then the other one is Are You Experienced?
Oh, interesting.
And the only
Now I
reason
have a question for you
yeah.
where you say, have you ever been experienced?
No.
Okay.
No, but the only thing I have with it is like I liked the song. I enjoyed listening to it. The problem for me is like it's the title track of the song, and it's not a song like that I'll talk about again. It was
Okay.
good,
Yeah, I
but
mean, I've always liked that song, but I understand what you mean on an album that where like 5 of the
it's
other songs
so
have a better case
overshadowed
of
on the
being
album, and it's the title track.
it's almost and now this is me wildly speculating. Even though it is not the strongest song on the record, the name of it, it just really sounds like a good album name, and maybe
Yeah,
they picked it just because of how good it sounds as an album name.
sure. And again, I totally respect that, and like I think I'm not knocking the song at all, and I would never knock the album, but like I just think like if I had to critique, because I try my best to, when there's an artist in the negative, look for positive, and
Mhm.
there was an artist that we could just sit here and fillet for 3
Yeah,
hours.
sure,
I
I
wanna
understand.
find some things that we could, like,
I'll get to
bring us
that
down
later,
to the
actually.
meaty. Sure. So I'll take us into Axis Bold as Love, but understand that I'm looking forward, I'm excited for what comes next. My first note is, what the fuck just happened?
EXP?
Yeah, EXP. I knew it was coming. Obviously, I'm not surprised. I've listened to this album
Mhm,
before multiple times, but it never makes sense. It's just like, what on earth just happened? What am I listening to?
mhm.
And it's weird. It's just full on a weird track.
Sure.
Um, from there, obviously, it gets better. The thing that I noticed, my big takeaway from this album, with so few months in between these albums, a different starting point is the best way I have to describe it. This feels like it's almost coming from like a jazzy bluesy place to me.
Yeah.
Like it's still like psychedelic-ish.
Oh, yeah,
It's
they
in that
definitely
vein.
pulled from jazz influences too when
Yeah,
they're
I
playing.
feel a bit heavier jazz and blues influence on this one than I did previously.
Okay.
And so what I my basically all my notes are that like it's a nuanced update, it's a different approach to an album,
Mhm.
which is just it's very surprising considering the very short turnaround time between albums.
Very short, yeah.
Uh my two I had three positives here.
Alright.
So obviously Little Wing. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
how do you not put Little Wing?
Yeah. Now I wonder
Uh
if you're gonna mention my favorite Hendrix song ever.
oh no,
We'll see. It's on
my
this
second
album.
one was She's So Fine,
Okay.
which was a really good one. I wanted to highlight that because that is
Noel
it's
Redding.
not Hendrix, it's Noel Redding.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I feel like that might be a song that's overlooked, but listening to it
I
again,
like Noel songs
I
on
liked Noel's
generally.
songs, and I
Yeah.
thought like him like taking the vocal on it and stuff. Like I feel like the Jimi Hendrix Experience, it's one of those things where it's like it's a band, is how it kind of is viewed in the popular culture,
Mhm.
like band in air quotes because it's just Jimi Hendrix,
Yeah, I mean,
but it
Noel Redding
totally
and Mitch
wasn't. Like the
Mitchell are
band.
integral. I mean,
Yes, I
they're
completely agree, and I just
yeah.
wanted to say that. And then my third one was Castles Made of Sand.
That is my all-time favorite
Yeah,
Hendrix song.
that an
All-time
easy
favorite.
highlight for
I
me. Great
love it.
song. Uh, and then of course, EXP was one of my two red songs,
Sure.
and then the other one was You've Got Me Floating.
Okay.
And the only reason was it's the opening of side two,
Mhm.
and it felt like a filler song.
Okay.
Like, which is weird because like there's only three Hendrix albums. There's only
Sure.
like it's such a small sample size.
Yeah.
It was weird that upon like re-listening, like it felt more like a filler pop song than anything else he put out.
Yeah.
So like I had to dock a
Okay.
point for it.
Fair enough. Alright, so, I mean, my overall take on Axis Bold as Love is it's commercially, in terms of the success and sales, even though they're still good, a step backwards.
Sure.
But in terms of songwriting, it's a step forwards. I think that we're now doing more things. We're taking what was happening on the first album and really expanding on it, trying out new sounds, trying out new techniques in studio, really kind of pushing the music forward here. And I mean, like I was talking about with you, a lot of my all-time favorites are on this record. Castles Made of Sand and Little Wing, most especially. But there's actually a couple that I was introduced to through John Mayer, funnily enough, because I heard John Mayer's cover of the title track "Bold as Love" before I heard Jimmy's version. And John does a great version of it on Continuum, which is incredible, and Jimmy's version is incredible. And the other one, it's only live. He performs it live with the John Mayer trio, Pino Palladino and Steve Jordan. Is "Wait Until Tomorrow," and they do a killer live version of that. And so it made me think a little bit harder about this song,
Sure.
the Hendrix version afterwards, which I've really come to enjoy, even though it was a song maybe I overlooked when I was younger, and when I was thinking of Hendrix, it probably wouldn't have been one of the 10 or 15 songs I named. But I really do enjoy it. And then If Six Was Nine is like such a cool tune.
Oh,
It's
totally.
such a cool tune. I really love it. I mean, this album is I guess the low light of their career because it was only platinum and it's only ranked number 92 on Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums of all time. So if the low light of your
To
career is
have the low light that they had.
if it's only the 92nd best album ever made by anyone, all right, I can live with that. Although I think it holds up fully to the first album. Like, I know that the first album
Yeah.
sold a lot more records and it went multi-platinum way more. Access Bold as Love is just as good. It is not a step back in any way.
To think that we will spend our entire careers striving and hoping to reach the lowest point of the career of the Jimi Hendrix Experience.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And most artists will.
Yeah, of
And
course.
fail.
Yeah. As
So,
will we.
yeah, exactly.
Until we succeed.
Yes.
Shooting for 91, baby.
Exactly. Oh, and I will say that he did have an issue with the cover. The cover has like Hindu imagery on the front. I actually
Yeah.
like physically like the art of the cover, but Hendrix kind of complained because he, I guess, had Native American ancestry
Okay.
in his family, and he would have preferred if they were going to do something kind of psychedelic in that way to incorporate it more with what he felt like was his personal ancestry. So
Sure.
I've given
Okay.
you the Hendrix complaint.
I understand.
And now I'll move on to Electric Ladyland, which is a double album.
Yeah, it is.
It's a very long record. And also it kind of shows a little bit of a divergence from Hendrix, who, like, without playing with this group for all that long, honestly, has experimented in a lot of ways. But in this way, he's experimenting, bringing in a lot of people to play with him. So that includes Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones and fellow 27 Clubber playing percussion on All Along the Watchtower. It includes Al Cooper from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. It includes Jack Cassidy on bass from Jefferson Airplane. It includes Buddy Miles on drums, and it includes almost all of the members of Traffic at one point or another: Steve Winwood, Dave Mason, and Chris Wood. And at the end of the day, you get a very, very interesting double album. It's kind of like he will pick like a huge epic on one side and blend it with a couple of other shorter songs. So like Voodoo Child is the A side and not Voodoo Child's Late Return. Very different song.
Yes.
Although like a similar idea. And that does feature Jack Cassidy on bass and on organ. But on Traffic, your like short song on this
Yeah.
record for him. And then it has so and this is where you also get the Noel Redding track of this album that he sings on, which is called Little Miss Strange. And I really like that one too. That one stuck out again because I think when you have the Hendrix Experience, when somebody else sings, it kind of sticks out in your brain a little bit.
It definitely does.
And then the C side of the record has the next big epic, the next 13 and a half minute song, which is 1983, A Merman I Should Turn to Be.
Yep.
And then you get the shorter songs on the last side of the record, but it also includes two of his biggest songs ever, all-time legendary songs, which are All Along the Watchtower, much better than the Bob Dylan version, no offense to Bob, and Voodoo Child Slight Return, which is the really famous one. So if you are not necessarily familiar with the full album, know that there is definitely a difference between Voodoo Child, which is a really long, drawn out, slow blues.
Mhm.
It's really good, but it is not Voodoo Child's Slight Return with that iconic riff that's been covered by just about everybody.
And definitely know that if you are a karaoke DJ who gets that requested of
Yes,
you,
great
uh,
point.
as I saw happen to a poor soul once at a bar
Oh
who
no.
requested Voodoo Child to sing and got Voodoo Child
Oh no.
and is like totally lost and like terrified for about 30 seconds until it gets fixed.
Oh man, that's rough.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, like to sum it up, it's really groovy. I'm hearing a lot of new things in the songwriting. I felt like he was always still pushing the creative boundaries.
Sure.
Every album from the Hendrix experience feels like it pushes creative boundaries, feels like it's taking the direction of music into a new place. It deserves all the accolades it gets. Um, oh, and Hendrix on this one didn't get the album cover he wanted. He actually wanted Linda Eastman, uh, or Linda McCartney, nay Eastman.
Yeah.
She was Linda Eastman at the time, to do the photo for the album cover, but that didn't end up working out.
Poor guy. Never got
I
never
know he
got the
didn't get a
album cover
single
he
album
wanted.
cover he wanted.
Okay, so I will not be as long as I've been. I will try to make this a little bit shorter. You've talked a lot about the quality of the music, and I'm not going to argue with you. I completely agree with you on all that.
Hmm.
What I want to talk about is probably more surprising to me was the lyrical growth,
Sure.
and particularly the reflective quality of some of these lyrics from a dude who obviously had no idea what was going to happen to him. How can
Yeah.
you?
Sure.
It's really interesting to me that multiple times on this album, there's a lot of like quiet reflection throughout these pieces. The one that I wanted to point out was Voodoo Child,
Hmm.
where it says, "If I don't meet you no more in this world, then I'll meet you in the next one. Don't be late. Don't be late." Pretty
Sure.
eerie when you consider what
Sure.
happened a short time after that, and there's multiple times on here where that happens. And then the only other thing that I'll talk about before I'll mention a couple specific songs as well. The most impressive part of this album to me, again, like I'm just as impressed between 2 and 3 as I was between 1 and 2,
Hmm.
is the noticeable growth in such a short time
Yeah.
to pull from
Yeah.
different sources to experiment with different things. And like at this point, now that we're on the third album, it fills me with like this like sadness of like what could have happened if we'd gotten even like 2 or 3 more albums from Jimi Hendrix, from the Jimi Hendrix Experience, with how much they're pushing the envelope and like changing the face of music with their albums. Like, what would music be if he'd continued to do
Yeah.
that?
And just to hammer home your point, if
Sure.
you look at the earliest, so there's a US and a UK release for all three records. If you look at the
Yeah.
earliest release and the latest release, only a year and 5 months separates these three
Crazy.
records, which is absolutely insane.
It really is. So,
Like, how did
uh,
he find time to tour? Because he literally played all the time. Like, he was constantly touring. So how did he do that in this?
I feel like maybe he didn't sleep that much.
He definitely didn't, ever.
You know, and there was obviously well documented use of substances.
Sure.
So, including the mythological part of like the whole issue with the reason he wore a bandana.
Mhm.
I'm sure you've heard all that.
I don't know. I don't know if I have. Tell
Oh,
me.
so like the theoretical, I'm sure it's all bullshit. Was that he wore the bandana constantly because he eventually used to just cut his forehead and put drugs directly in there to like absorb them
Oh yeah,
faster.
that sounds like it's crazy.
It was all horseshit, but like it was a rumored thing apparently, and I was like, that's
Yeah,
not
I
real.
don't know if that's how anything works.
Who knows how
Yeah.
things work, dude?
I've never attempted to cut open my forehead and put drugs in, to be fair.
That's fair. Like, what if it works?
But
No.
it might.
But my three songs are super basic. It's All Along the Watchtower, Voodoo Child's Late Return, and Crosstown Traffic.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Those are my three. Crosstown Traffic I really enjoyed because it's like
Oh,
just a
great.
straight up like 2-minute rock and roll song,
Mhm.
and I'm like, that's refreshing. It's like you're drinking like, you won't experience this, but it's like you're drinking like a stout beer, like a thick, heavy beer, which is what a lot of this music is. And then you just take like a real deep sip of like refreshing water
Mm,
to like cleanse the palate, is what it felt like
okay.
to me. And then I had no negatives for this album.
Yeah,
I think it's
understandable.
exquisitely pieced together.
Fantastic. So, I guess it's time for me to talk, right?
It is time for you to talk, sir.
Okay. So, I gotta start with the unique thing, which I've already hinted at.
Sure.
He has got to be the only artist we have ever covered or ever will cover where every single album they ever put out is ranked in the top 100 albums of all time by Rolling Stone. There's
Until
no
until until we really break out.
yeah, right. Yeah. But I mean, the fact that 3 for 3, 92 was the worst they ever got. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
So it's not
incredible.
even the top 500 albums. It's the
Right,
top
in the
100
within the top
albums.
100, yeah.
It's wild.
It truly is. My 6 Degrees. Now, I had a lot like, I coulda gone with the different bands that he played in before, like the Isley Brothers and all that stuff, and talked about that.
There's one 6 degrees that if you don't say, I'm gonna be really pissed at you.
You can say because okay, so I went with something a little out of left field for this.
Oh, I'm gonna be so mad if it's not the one.
It might not be the one, but you're more than welcome to add it. So, for my 6 Degrees to make sense, you have to transport yourself back to the late '60s to hippie time. There was a very notorious groupie who existed, throughout the '60s and '70s, and even up until current times. But, like, back in a time where, like, "Oh, my occupation is groupie. I just kind of follow a band
Yeah.
around and do stuff." There was an extremely famous person, who was very well known, especially in California, but also in several other places, named Cynthia Plastercaster. And what
Okay.
she did, do you not know about this? Oh, I'm so
I
excited
I
to tell you.
I know a little bit. I
Okay,
don't I don't know enough.
so what Cynthia Plastercaster did was she would take
Yeah.
plaster casts
I can
of erect penises
yes.
from of rock stars. And recently, as starting in 2000 to the present, she also takes plaster casts of the breasts of female artists.
Well, good for her
It's a
for
it
being more
only
inclusive.
yeah, it only took her so long. Jimmy and Noel are two of the largest jewels in her crown, so to speak. But she has also taken casts of Eric Burdon, members of other bands that we've covered, like the Rascals, Iron Butterfly, Foghat, and a guy named Richard Cole, who was Led Zeppelin's tour manager.
There we
So
go.
all plaster casts of their penises all exist. Thank you, Cynthia Plastercaster.
Yeah, I watched I only know of Cynthia Plastercaster from like a YouTube video of like the weirdest adjacent music, like people adjacent to music you've ever heard of
Mm,
or you've never heard of or something like
sure.
that is what it was called. And she was part of that. So,
Okay.
because of
Yeah,
course she was, because that's
of course.
crazy.
Yeah.
Listen,
I found out about her because I read Pamela DeBar's book, I'm with the Band. She was like also one of those like super famous groupies who was, you know, hanging around in California at
yeah,
around that time and was spent a lot of time and got to know a ton of the different artists and not to get into salacious details, but
I respect it. However, I'm furious with you
go
because
ahead.
there was such. Do you even know what I'm gonna say?
Does it have anything to do with the peppermint twist?
No, maybe
It has
not.
nothing to do with him being in the same band as Joe Pesci at
Oh,
this
yeah,
point.
that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's exactly what it is. He was in Joey D and the
Joey D and the
Starlighters
Starlighters.
with Joe Pesci,
Yeah.
who we actually covered on the celebrity
That's
singing
great.
episode of the podcast.
But we
And it's
talked
like,
about that in that episode, so I didn't.
yeah, but it's
So I
it's a 6 degrees
needed to
still.
talk about this, Pat. I needed to do it.
I understand, and I do not begrudge you. I in fact think we should preemptively plaster cast our own penises. I think maybe that would
Duly
be,
noted.
we can send them to
Later
Cynthia
on,
and be like, for your collection, madam.
yes,
But
I
we
will.
need to get her consent first before we give
Yes,
her any part of our penis.
for sure. All right, the highlight.
Yeah, a highlight.
I mean, it has to be the fact that he headlined Woodstock. He was the headline
Yeah.
act. He was the number one act of the largest music festival, like the most historically, culturally significant musical event, maybe ever. And some interesting things that kind of allude to something you were saying earlier. So when they went on, and they didn't go on until 8 a.m. Monday. So like Woodstock, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 8 a.m. Monday, they start. He had been awake for 3 days at that point. And he actually collapsed coming off the stage at the end of their set. But during that set, he performed a ton of stuff. But what was considered the greatest performance of all time by Guitar World is his version of the Star Spangled Banner that took place during that performance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that made a lot of sense for me as the highlight. For the low light, I mean, it's the death of Jimi Hendrix. The fact that on September 18th, 1970, he asphyxiated on his own vomit after taking an overdose of barbiturates. And there is some like openness and controversy still left around his death. It was left as something that's called an open verdict in the UK, which basically means, yes, there is suspicion around this death, but there is no evidence to confirm or to further investigate what we know. So we're not saying it wasn't suspicious, but we're not saying we can do anything about it or investigate it any further. Like we're at a dead end where there's nothing else we can do with this, but we're not closing it and saying this was not a suspicious death.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that means they think somebody else gave him the pills or if they think he had committed suicide by the amount of I think it was like sleeping pills of his girlfriend at the time, where he had taken like 9 of them when the dose was like half of one pill.
Yeah.
So,
No, I get you.
yeah. And then last but not least, our meanest, nicest. So I went with meanest here. What I found was, because again, like what you said, we could sit here and say nothing but great things the entire time, but he was allegedly like a very problematic drunk person. Like he drank a lot, and when he was really drunk, he would become angry and violent. We could talk about some specific incidences, but there were times when he would like actually become physically violent. So he hit his girlfriend Carmen Barrero in 1969 with a vodka bottle and cut her so badly that she needed to get it stitched back up. He got into a drunken brawl in January of 1968 in Sweden, actually, and he smashed a plate glass window and hurt himself and had to receive medical treatment. So he had a very negative relationship with alcohol, we'll say, to say the least.
Okay, well that's sad. You know what else is sad? I was looking up Cynthia Plastercaster. She did pass away.
Oh no.
Yeah, in 2022, so last year, of cerebrovascular disease. But her entire collection. So she worked with 2 of her like really trusted friends, because as she was like winding down in her life, and to that she wanted them to search for a museum that would take it seriously. And the Kinsey Institute bought her whole collection and displays it.
Oh, that's interesting. That makes sense, though. The Kinsey Institute. I mean,
it makes a lot of sense. So good for her that at least her work will live on. and is being prominently
And there will
displayed
be
and taken
one
seriously.
other time I bring that back up later on. But for
Interesting.
now, it's time to talk about Nirvana.
Cool, cool. Yeah, I was trying to find the name of that video
Mhm.
that mentioned it, and I saw that she died. I was like, no, sadness.
Yeah.
Alright.
But you gotta love that she existed. Like, that was
Oh, it's
that
great,
was
dude.
what she did was could you even like, where would you even get the thought?
Hey,
It would never occur to me the other way around. I would never be like, "Oh my god, I fucking love music so much, I'm gonna go find a bunch of my favorite female musicians and see if I can take plaster castings of their breasts. Let's see what they think about that, if they're willing to have those done."
time.
Yeah.
I think if she had started in like the 2000s, it might not have gone as well.
No.
It's the fact that she started it when she
Sure.
did that was so.
And, like, you know what I've read about it in other books too? Like, she definitely tried to get other artists because I feel like I remember maybe in Eric Clapton's autobiography, him talking about, like, when he met her and how she was, like, working with other people he knew, and he was like,
Yeah.
maybe not me."
Yeah, that makes sense. I get it. It's such a list.
Especially he finds out that Hendrix has already been done, and he doesn't wanna be outdone by Hendrix, like, how many different ways?
Yeah, that makes sense. Who wants to get put up against?
Yeah.
First off, seriously, I mean, what can't Jimi Hendrix do now? Because he's the one of the prize jewels of the collection. Of course he is.
Of course.
Of course the dude can play like that, has this level of musical talent and growth in such a short time, and is hung like a horse. Come
Did
on.
you look it up?
No, I didn't look at the picture yet.
I
I
mean,
will.
I
But
said crown jewel because, um, he was, like, the most famous person
yeah.
that she did.
Well, and Lester Cast is now something that
Yeah,
I've looked up.
he is 0004.
Yeah.
'Cause the first 2 people she did were listed as friend, and then 0004 and there's no 0001 for whatever reason. And then the next 2 are Jimi Hendrix, Noel Redding, and then you get to Eric Burdon by number 8, Richard Cole, who is the Zeppelin tour manager. You get a couple members of MC5, you get, um, Iron Butterfly, The
Certainly,
Rascals, Foghat, Argent. You get the Love and Spoonful, Zal Yanofsky. You get some Mothers of Invention members, someone who was in the Beach Boys for a time named Ricky Fattar. You get um, Flying Burrito Brothers members, maybe.
certainly does not leave much to the imagination.
Did you look up a picture?
Yeah. Certainly,
Share that on your screen, would you?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure. It's just art. It's in the Kinsey Institute.
That's true.
I'm not gonna do that though. Oh god, it was still there. I like hit back to try to get it, and it was just
Yeah,
back on the big screen of it. Like, hello, Jimmy. I wasn't expecting you.
right.
I see you're happy to see me. Cool, cool, cool. All right. I am almost entirely ready already
Well,
for.
you just tell me when you are.
Yeah. What if I told you? Now, this may be bold, that I was ready now.
3, 2, 1.
Nirvana was an American rock band formed in Aberdeen, Washington in 1987. And they were active from 1987 until 1994, where they broke up for no reason at all.
Yeah, whatever.
And we
Just we're
went
tired of
over
playing with each other.
we went over 3 albums. We started with Bleach, which came out in 1989. We followed that up with Nevermind from 1991, and we closed it out with In Utero from 1993. And we, of course, covered the entire discography of Nirvana,
Right.
as previously mentioned on this episode. 6 albums, and it's the only 6 albums these artists put out. And I will start talking about Bleach.
As you
Here's the thing. This is a Nirvana album by name. And then we should maybe move on. It's not, I mean, this is so
Okay.
different. It's so different from the Nirvana sound. It's you can hear like what is going to happen. You can hear like
Yeah.
pieces, and there are some
Right. I
songs.
don't think it's a lost
No,
cause
no,
or
no. I don't.
anything.
I don't
I
think
think
so either. I Here's the problems that I have with this album. One, I feel like it might have been recorded and produced with a single toaster as the entire like
just one.
energy behind the production. It is so crappy in terms of production value. It's like it's rough. It's bad.
Well, it was 1989. They were still nobody.
Yes, and that
I mean, they were somebody in Seattle.
dude, it's but like it's like almost they were signed. I mean, they were signed to the Sub Pop label. Like
Sure,
a
but
label actually put them in the studio that had this production value. It's
yeah,
crazy to me.
yeah, yeah.
The in terms of getting past the production value, the whole thing just feels super rushed. In a way that like it doesn't necessarily provoke an emotion. It just feels off tempo. I specifically did notice like the overall kind of basic sound of the drums. It's like
It's not Dave Grohl.
it's not Dave Grohl, and it's like it's also just kind of simple throughout. Um, Listen, shout out here to the godsend Chris Novoselic, who
Mhm.
holds down this freaking album by clearly being the most competent musician on this album.
I fully agree with you.
Like
I
he
fully
is
agree with you.
he is holding this entire thing together
Yeah,
with his bass lines,
you're right.
and I I was like very impressed with him.
Mhm.
And the rest of the album. Listen, you have Blue, About a Girl, and School, which
Those
are
are your 3.
all those are my three. I have a fourth one, which is Love Buzz, but it's a
Okay,
cover,
that's my one, yeah.
but it's a really good cover.
Yeah,
And I really enjoy it. But I wanted to include three of their originals because
sure.
I thought they're all good. About a Girl is probably the most famous song on the album.
Yes.
And then my two negatives are one, Floyd the Barber. Well, that could just go away. I mean, that's a bad song. That's just bad.
Sure.
And then second, and I put this as a note, and then after doing my research, realized that thankfully Kurt Cobain fully agreed with me. The vocals on this album are terrible.
Yeah.
Like they're very bad.
Yeah.
Like he hated them too, and he apparently really wanted to go in and redo them, and there just wasn't time.
Okay.
And it's like they're like screechy, and like you can feel him like the kind of like quote unquote whine that he's famous for post this clearly isn't there.
Mhm.
And but he's still doing the same affectation, but instead of having it be like a gritty whine, it's like a squeal thing.
Mhm.
Rough to listen to. Overall, I could hear where they're going, and I'm excited for what's coming. But this album on its own merits, I get why it's the kind of forgotten child of Nirvana.
Yeah. And that's kind of like my first line of my notes is there are two things that are equally clear to me. This is a band that is starting to break new ground, and this is a band that is not nearly as good as they're going to be. I, you
100%.
know, this is not a particularly good album on its own. I mean, you mentioned About a Girl, definitely the most famous song on this album of their stuff, I would say. But I also would say that most people know that because of the MTV Unplugged version. And the
Sure.
whole time I was listening to the studio version, I was like, I really wish I was listening to MTV Unplugged right now. Which, are you ready for my hot take?
I'm ready.
Nirvana's MTV Unplugged is their best album.
I
Is
what's
that
is
okay?
that a hot take?
It's a hot take considering how lauded Nevermind is.
Sure, but I
But I
fully agree with
love
you.
MTV Unplugged.
I think it's the best MTV Unplugged.
Yeah, I agree with you there too.
I mean, and like I think like that's one of the reasons I'm most sad about MTV Unplugged going away. And while I'm really thankful for things like Tiny Desk and like things
Yeah,
like that
those
that
are
can
great.
kind of keep it going a little bit.
Mhm.
But there was something about the MTV Unplugs, like them, Alice in Chains, like great performances in the Unplugged. I mean, Alice in Chains had its
Alice in
moments.
Chains was Lane Staley was half dead by the time, unfortunately, so he did
Yeah,
not
well,
sound
but
good.
Alice in Chains still had its moments.
Sure.
But I'm saying there were some really great MTV Unplugs. You know who actually is kind of doing that? Like, this is going to be so wild. It's multiple times we've discussed this person this day, but not this episode. We
Mhm.
talked about her technically last week. Kelly Clarkson on
Hmm.
her like daily, her like morning talk show thing that she does.
I didn't even know
Whenever
she
she
did that.
has musical artists, they'll just sit for like 10, 15, 20 minutes and just like sing snippets and like of parts of like their songs throughout their history of their career.
Hmm.
And it's like a really nice like celebratory moment where like she'll like do like harmonies with them but always give them the floor.
Okay.
It's like it's not the same thing obviously, but it definitely harkens to like at its core MTV Unplugged felt like a celebration of music.
Okay.
And it's like that same vein.
Gotcha.
Okay, but I mean that's what I had for this.
Fair enough. Alright, so oh, there was one other thing I wanna say real quick about Love Buzz because that
Yeah,
that
love
was the
those.
to me, that's the only song on this album that I actually listen to, like, the studio version of that I like.
Yeah.
It shows the most promise from Kurt's guitar, which is otherwise super lacking on this record. And I think it's actually also a great formula for finding a cover song, which is you take a band that's a one-hit wonder, like Shocking Blue, known for Venus and only Venus,
Yeah.
and you'll listen around until you find one other really good but totally unappreciated and unknown songs in their discography, and then you fully make it your own.
Sure.
And so that like to me, that was like, oh, that's actually kind of a genius way to go about picking a song to cover.
Are you implying that we should do that?
I'm not necessarily saying we need to, but I just do think it's kind of an interesting way to come up with the cover. It's fairly successful.
I mean, I'll listen to Rick Astley's albums
Yeah.
again,
Oh God, no! Please don't. All right, never mind.
but
So from the jump, I mean, the first song on this is one of the most famous songs ever written. It smells like Teen Spirit.
correct.
God damn, does Dave Grohl make a difference, man?
Oh
Dave
my god,
Grohl.
dude, it's immediate and enormous.
It is yeah. I mean, Dave Grohl instantly 20 times better of a band. Uh, and I will say this too, like Kurt, noticeably better as a guitarist, noticeably better as a vocalist on this record. Like Kurt has come a long way between Bleach and Nevermind. Um, and this is Nirvana at their peak. Like this is the best you're gonna get from them. You get In Bloom, you get Come As You Are and Lithium, but also you get some of what I think is their best acoustic work, their best work that like really breaks away from the mold. I've always loved Polly. That's one that I do with our band when we're doing acoustic shows with great frequency. And I also really like Something in the Way. Um, so I mean, all like this is the iconic sound. This is like the album that broke the '90s, that kind of changed the way that music was going to be thought about. Like this was a turning point, much like you could say some of Hendrix's records were real turning points in the
Yeah.
way that the art form was going to happen. Nevermind was also a real turning point in the way that art was going to be thought of. But just like you kind of mentioned some songs that you could live without off this record, I'll throw mine out there. The like every time I listen to this record, and I do listen to this record once or twice a year at least,
Let's see.
I could do without Endless Nameless. I don't need that.
It's fair. It's fair. That's one I had. I had two.
Okay.
Um,
I'm curious what
cool.
your other one is.
Listen, man. Here's. Oh, I'll get there.
Okay.
I have the same note as you. Immediately, a much better band.
Yeah.
Like you can hear it right away. Also, again, like harping on the first album, the production quality of this album
Sure.
is immaculate.
Sure.
Every single piece of this record felt like real and legitimate. So that is a huge piece as well. Now, Dave Grohl makes a world of difference, is what I said. and Kurt's vocals are vastly improved.
Yeah, and his
So,
guitar. I don't wanna underrepresent, like, how much better and more interesting he got on guitar.
yeah, for sure. I agree with you on that as well. I just I specifically ragged the vocals in the first
Mhm,
album, so I therefore specifically lauded them
yeah.
on this one.
He did, however, lie about having a gun.
Yeah, Jesus, he did. He did in fact. Uh, obviously, I have four greens, and you mentioned all of them. You can't not green smells like Teen Spirit. It's
No.
absolutely iconic. I also have In Bloom. I also have Lithium. I
Yeah.
also have Polly.
Okay.
All wonderful, wonderful songs.
Yeah.
And then my other one, other than the one you said was Breed.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Breed's just kind of loud noisiness. Considering
Yeah.
there's
Like, of the
so much
first 6
direction.
tracks, 5 of them are, like, great songs and pretty
Yeah,
big for them, and the other one is Breed.
it's Breed. Well, I'm assuming you know the story of Polly, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Mhm,
I'll mention it for anybody who may not know it. That is a real. It's based on a true event
mhm.
that happened in 1987. There was a kidnapping of a 14-year-old girl whose name has never been released, and she was abducted by a man named Gerald Friend. Ironic.
Yeah.
Who trigger warning for anybody here. I'll avoid the graphic language itself, but triggering things are about to be said. So I would skip maybe the next minute or maybe minute and a half if you're concerned about that. So going on from that, she was kidnapped, brought back to his mobile home, and she was sexually assaulted and tortured with things such as a whip, a razor, a blowtorch. She then eventually managed to escape after a friend had taken not a friend after Gerald Friend had taken her for a ride and then stopped and got gas, and she managed to escape. And he was arrested and sent to jail, obviously, because
Yeah.
he's
Where
scum.
he should stay.
Yeah. I did realize I wanted to discuss one other thing, but I'll discuss it later.
Okay.
There will be another trigger warning later. I will announce when it's going to happen.
Very good.
But that is what I had for this album. And then for number 3, for In Utero, it's interesting for me because we've moved further into the future. And I feel like it's a marriage of future Nirvana and past Nirvana. As in, like, this album feels like a blending of the first two albums more so than anything else. It has that heavier sound that the first album was like leaning into a little bit and less of the like pulled back sound of the grunge. But I think it's done in a way that is still quite enjoyable for the most part. If that makes a lot of sense. I think that you're getting different stuff. Heart Shaped Boxes on this album.
Mhm.
I love that song. That is such a good song.
Yeah.
And if you it like truly to me, I think that's the most like catchy sheer riff that they ever put out. I mean,
It's a
the
good one.
beginning of Smells Like is also iconic sounding, but in terms of just like a catchy hook riff, like the
Yeah,
bow
they've got a
now now
few.
now now now, they do. They really
They
do.
do. I mean, Come As You Are's got a good one. I also on this album, All Apologies. Ding, 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 ding,
Yeah.
ding, 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 ding.
They do have more than one,
They've
but
got a
I
couple good ones.
Heart Shaped Box is the one for
Yeah.
me. They also have Dumb on this album, which is incredible.
Mhm.
I love that song.
Me too.
Uh, Also, I mean, listen, again, I feel like it's rough. So they have a song called "Rape Me,"
Mhm.
which is like ironic, and it's a good song, and it's inflammatory, and it's supposed to be. But I think for the most part, like you're getting another strong showing from Nirvana.
Yeah. Okay, I need to say this before I talk about my review of the album. So I looked into Gerald Friend after you had discussed because I knew the
Yeah,
story, but I didn't really know like the people. I just kind of knew generally what it was about.
yeah,
So it needs to be said that the story that you mentioned occurred like 27 years after he abducted a 12-year-old girl that was hitchhiking and did all of those same horrible things essentially.
Jesus.
And she escaped, and he like was found by his father later on, who was like looking for him because he knew he was the guilty party in whatever this was. He ended up getting injured in the struggle, and he was taken to jail, and he was sentenced to 75 years, and he served 20 years. During those 20 years, he escaped from prison twice, and then he was let out. And shortly after he was let out, the Polly story.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
What a terrible waste of a human being.
Yeah. Fuck that guy, honestly. I'm
That
not afraid to say it. Totem Talks takes a strong anti-Gerald Friend stance. Fuck that guy.
I couldn't agree more. I
Thank
double
goodness.
down. Anybody who is in that vein, I also take a
I
staunch
agree.
stance against.
Yeah, and I'm not afraid to say it. Like,
No,
I
neither am
hate
I.
people who commit horrible, violent acts against other people,
Yeah,
including children.
especially children.
Yeah. All right. So in utero, I think it offers again a lot of Nirvana's best, most iconic tracks. And it feels like in direction and in quality in a lot of ways more in line with Nevermind, but it doesn't fully recapture that magic. There are definitely more misses on In Utero than there were
Sure.
in Nevermind, like you kind of alluded to. Um, but I do like the growth that you see in Cobain, because you're going to get a lot more interesting parts, like you mentioned the riff for Heart Shaped Box. Just doing stuff like that, just like exploring different ways that the guitar can kind of fill in when you're in a three-piece band, and getting better and better in that at that from album to album is a nice growth that I like to see from him. And that's my
Yeah.
main takeaway. Obviously, it's 2 of 3 for Nirvana.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about Nirvana now. So first off, the unique thing, I have two. I was torn between these two because I think they're both interesting. So Kurt Cobain actually dropped out of high school and ended up almost immediately after dropping out working as the janitor at the high school he dropped out of. Right around, right around when he was starting to like work with Chris Novoselic on forming a band, which they tried and failed multiple times. Their original band was actually a CCR tribute band, which is an interesting thought to think of those two individuals in that kind of band.
Sure.
So the other one that I have is so Chris Novoselic had they played a gig in Nirvana at the Seattle Center that Chris played in, despite being banned for life from the venue, because of a year earlier. And this actually doubles as my 6 Degrees, other than Dave Grohl being in the band and also covering Foo Fighters, which is obviously such an easy 6 Degrees.
Yeah, of course.
Chris Novoselic was banned from the Seattle Center for life for acting out during a Sonic Youth concert.
Well
And
done.
the band had no idea until they get to the dressing room and they're going down like the back, like the hallway to get to the room, and there's like a bunch of faces on a wall, and he's on the wall,
Oh,
and he's
that's
like, "Oh
crazy.
yeah, I got banned for life from this place." He played the gig. Nothing ever happened.
I
I guess they
love that.
squashed their beef.
Yeah, well, when you're in Nirvana, I think they kinda let you slide.
Right. So my highlight for me, I keep looking. This has been a rough research time for me because the
Sure,
last two, I've had to give it to the big album. And how do you not give Nevermind
sure.
as the highlight of this group? I mean, the release of Nevermind, the sheer skyrocketing success it has had. It's one of the highest selling confirmed albums of all time. It, it's clearly the highlight of their career.
Oh, for sure. I agree. Can I
Uh,
stop you while you're doing this? Can I take a brief interlude?
yeah, go ahead.
There's one other thing I have to fucking say about this Gerald Friend guy.
Oh my god.
He
Back to
was
fuck Gerald
I
Friend.
know. He was one of the suspects in the Green River killer case. Like, the
No.
Green River, who is, from what I looked at real quick, the second most prolific serial killer in United States history. I guess they had a very similar profile or something, but there was a time when Gerald Friend was under investigation as potentially being the Green River killer.
Real upstanding member of society, this Gerald.
Oh my god, he's awful.
He's the worst. He's the worst.
And
It's
he's
such-
still
ugh.
alive.
I
He was
know.
born in 1937. Just die already.
He's in prison. I guess they're
Yeah,
keeping,
that's good.
you know, whatever.
That's for the best, I think.
Oh, yeah, it's for the best for sure. Okay, so I have a few different lowlights here. Obviously, we could talk about the death of Kurt Cobain, the band splitting up because of Kurt Cobain's death. Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic immediately were like, "Well, we can't keep doing this.
Sure.
We can't replace him. We're not going to replace Kurt and stuff." So they went their separate ways after that. A couple other ones that I wanted to say. One was, I guess, a low light, but also like a fun fact, which is crazy. Kurt Cobain, during the recording of Nevermind, was living in his car.
Oh, wow.
He was homeless and living in, like, he would drive to the studio, like, record and then drive away and go park and sleep.
Oh, damn.
So, and then Nevermind happened.
That probably changed his fortunes a bit.
Yeah, I would agree. But then the other thing, which is like kind of shitty, is that after Nevermind, when the royalties and stuff blew up, Kurt Cobain like kind of got into it with the other two members over royalties.
Mm.
So they had like split equally. They had like equal, you know, taking the stuff, and he wanted to shift it into something more reflective of the amount of music he was contributing. Because he was contributing the vast majority of songs and pieces of songs and all that stuff. And the other two members were like okay with that. They were like, sure, like I understand you are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. We're fine giving you that. And then he wanted it to be retroactive to Nevermind, which caused a whole bunch of issues. It nearly broke up the band. They had like a week of just like screaming matches and fighting and like violent, all that stuff. And then they did end up giving Kurt Cobain 75% of the royalties for Nevermind.
Oh, wow.
So they caved on it, but like that's shitty that like,
yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, what's done is done. Like if we had written Lifetime and like Lifetime came out and like say it got picked up and the song Lifetime Left to Go became like a mega hit and like it went like triple diamond, I wouldn't be like, well, I wrote a chunk of, I wrote most of that one, so I want, like, I mean, it's already released.
Yeah,
but I just wanted to say that
it's,
that's a low light for me.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I mean, especially considering one, the importance of Chris to holding together the band, and two, like Nirvana is not Nirvana without Dave Grohl on drums. Like, I'm sorry, Bleach, but like the amount that he contributes to making the track successful is deserves to say.
Yeah, although we should mention that Chad Channing is actually the drummer on Polly in on the album.
Okay, fair.
So, just to give credit where credit's due.
Of course.
Okay, so the nicest parts about Nirvana, and this is a really good one, I think. Like it's probably the best one that I've seen, except for like specifically like starting charity organizations. This is a band that came to prominence in the 80s and early 90s, obviously.
Right.
And their propensity of being so far ahead of the curve in terms of like being against sexism and racism and homophobia and all of those things, and like rights for all of those people. I think the further back in history you go, the more amazing it is to have people that are for all of those things. And like Dave Grohl, or Kurt Cobain in particular, but all of them were very staunch supporters of all of that.
Yes.
Very publicly advocated for all of those causes. which is really good. It's a really
Yeah,
good part.
definitely.
And then we get to the meanest, and I look. It's got to be a lot of the stuff Kurt Cobain did. That's what it is. I mean, you have multiple instances of like kind of quote unquote junkie behavior. He
Hmm.
was arrested for an alleged abuse of Courtney Love.
Right.
There was, a bunch of allegations and things of him like being, high for performances or missing appointments and things because he was, you know, on
Sure.
drugs.
Yeah.
And it's a disease.
Absolutely.
And we both agree with that. We both are firmly in the, even if you make the choice to start drugs, regardless of the fact of like peer pressure and societal
Hmm.
pressure and like economic pressure and all of those
Sure.
things that start uh the career of a junkie, it in of itself is a physical disease that is so
Absolutely.
freaking hard to break and
Hmm.
changes you as a person.
Sure.
And a good example of this is the second meanest thing that I have, which is, this is alleged, of course. It's an alleged that uh Kurt Cobain like had claimed he was hungry to Chris Novoselic, and uh, Chris was driving him to a fast food place, a specific one that Kurt Cobain wanted to go to. He's in the mood for, and it was when they pulled into the place that he realized he would actually he specifically wanted that fast food place because it was in his his drug dealer's neighborhood, and it
Mm.
was actually like he was getting drugs.
Yeah.
And when Chris like confronted him about it and was like, "I'm on to you. I figured it out." Kurt like straight up just punched him in the face and got out of the car and ran away.
Uh,
So it's that, and it's typical behavior.
yeah.
So that's kind of what it is. But that unfortunately is it. And then
Sure.
I already gave my 6 degrees, so that's what I got for Nirvana.
Excellent. So, shall we grade?
I say yes, we shall in fact grade.
Excellent. So, I think as a general rule, these grades are going to be lower than we anticipate because each artist only put out 3 records despite their greatness
Yeah,
and impact on history.
that's fair.
However, I think we can both agree that both artists are going to start with a number in the nines for
For the
cultural
first
impact.
category, of course, cultural impact is
Yes. Now,
gigantic for
I
both
would
of
like to
these.
talk about both of them first, and then I'm going to talk about Jimmy a little bit.
Okay,
So I think both of them, one, household names. The members are
sure.
household names. The music that they produced not only was incredibly popular, but was also groundbreaking for the time and pushing the art forward. They're very similar in that way. They're also very similar in the fact that they were three-piece bands and the fact that they both had frontmen who very famously died at age 27, who were both guitarist singers, who were both
Yeah.
left-handed. There are a lot of interesting parallels here.
Who both were almost in the military.
That's right. Now, I will give Jimmy's resume aside from that. So, he is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, of course, the class of 1992. And the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has called him, quote, arguably the greatest instrumentalist in rock history. He played at the Monterey Pop Festival. He played at the Isle of Wight Festival. He headlined Woodstock, which is the largest festival probably in the history of music, or maybe the art form. He was one of the first popularizers of several guitar effects, including fuzz, the Octavia pedal, and the wah pedal. Billboard and Rolling Stone both proclaimed him Artist of the Year at some point when he was still alive. He was in the UK Hall of Music as of 2005. He's influenced not just like a lot of guitarists, but just that the way that the guitar is played. And I'm curious, like, now I know I talk a lot about this, and you kind of usually just say, like, you're the one who plays the instrument. You think a lot about this. You can hear those connections. When you listen to Jimi Hendrix for this refresher this week, was it clear to
Yeah.
you how much his style is just like literally ubiquitous amongst all guitarists, myself included? Like
Yeah.
I stand on the shoulders of Jimmy because of so many things about his playing. As just some nobody person who likes to play guitar in a band in the suburbs of Philadelphia, like everyone takes something of what they've done from Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, I think it did become very clear to me the more I listened to and listening to it again, because I've listened to all three of the albums, but it had been a
Mhm.
few years
Right.
since I've gone through all three of them. Like I'll listen to songs, but
Yeah,
I would say it's probably been like at least 5 years.
sure. And I wanted to hear your kind of perspective on that, like how clear it was to you.
It was very evident to me, like it always becomes super evident to me when I hear things that don't stick out to me from like people that I consider the greatest of something.
Mhm.
And I consider Jimi Hendrix one of the greatest, but like
Oh, yeah.
for me it became a moment of like when I listened to Clapton or when I listened to other people that you can consider in that echelon of guitarist, I hear things that are unique to them. Like I
Mhm.
hear like I hear slow hand stuff, or like I can hear like 15 seconds of a John Mayer song, but like that's a John
Oh,
Mayer
yeah,
song. I can
for
hear
sure.
it. So I wasn't getting that from Hendrix for a bit on this listen. And then it clicked to me. It's because it's everyone else.
It's because it's everyone
It's
else.
because he is like the tea bag,
Mhm.
and I've been drinking the tea for 31 years.
Exactly.
Is what it that's what it I
100%.
did fully get that.
100%.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up his resume, he is a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He has the keys to the city of Seattle. Rolling Stone named him the #1 guitarist and the #6 artist of all time. He has recordings in the Library of Congress. He has Grammys. He has Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. He has a USPS commemorative stamp. And most importantly, the plaster cast of his penis is in the Icelandic Phallological Museum.
It's true. I can't believe the Kinsey Institute let it
They let that one go to
yeah.
Iceland? Are you
Well,
kidding
that
me?
one had been sold for years.
Okay.
And I
I
guess
mean,
I guess they couldn't get it back.
let me put his resume is so good. If you wanted to sit here and say like 9.9, I would be like, yes, that is correct.
Yeah, man. I think I was literally gonna say 9.9. I
Yeah.
was like, there's an argument for a 10.
I think there is too.
I think there's argument for a 10, and the only reason I don't want to put him at a 10 is the brevity of his career.
Sure.
That's
Yeah, I mean,
it.
in a year and 5
It's
months of this band is
yeah,
what we're talking.
like that's what I'm saying. So like it's the only thing I can think to take any points off is like we're talking about,
I think it's
not a
pretty
lot of
clear
17 months
that if
basically.
Jimmy didn't die young and tragically, this score would probably be a 10, and it wouldn't even be a question.
Yeah.
Okay,
And who knows at that point what else we'd be talking about. That's what's
right.
crazy.
And there's still we're gonna give him the 9.9, but, like, if someone is listening and be like, "No, it should have been a 10," I, like, fully get that.
I
Yeah.
can't like it's one of those things where it's like I feel like we as people, as like a humanity, can start gassing ourselves up. And I
Mhm.
think it's important at that point to like, let a little air out, look at things logically, and like trying to do that and find a reason and take away the 10. The only thing I can come up with is the length. And
Right.
it feels like people that we've given a 10 for, although we gave Buddy Holly a 10.
You're right.
Fuck
You're
it, give
right,
him a
and
10.
yeah, okay. I'm with it.
That was the only thing. It was the only thing stopping
Yeah,
me.
I mean,
And
it's
I was like, wait, we
similar
gave
in
Buddy
terms of
Holly a
career
10. And
length. I guess really the only difference was, like, who came first.
yeah, obviously it was the chicken or the
That's
egg.
correct. Well, I don't know.
One of those two.
All right, Nirvana is gonna stay firmly in the 9s for me relative to
Yeah,
that.
they're not a 10.
But like, there's a conversation to be had here. I'm sure, like, you're the Nirvana guy today, so
Yeah, and listen, they're inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Multiple tracks have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame separately to
mhm,
themselves. They have the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Similar things, like accolades galore from this band. And something to remember is they're still collecting accolades,
sure.
because you know the length of time, like Jimi
Yeah,
Hendrix,
the length of time that's passed since
you
the
know,
group
and more time
finished.
from
Yeah,
Jimi Hendrix than we got from Nirvana in terms of all of those things. However, we're still getting a ton of awards and accolades for this group. In 2003, Rolling Stone placed Kurt Cobain as the 12th best guitarist of all time and the 45th greatest singer in 08.
Crazy to me.
Yeah.
The 12th greatest guitarist is wrong.
Both of
But
those
he
are
is
wrong. I'm
good.
sorry.
Yeah, you're like I think he's maybe a better vocalist than a guitarist because he
Yes.
has that ability to like really scream in a way that sounds melodic and good that not very many people have ever had.
Very, very few.
Um, but yeah, like
Almost exclusively grunge artists as well.
yeah, I would say on Bleach he is a below average guitarist for sure.
Yeah.
By the time you get to the other two records, he is above average. Like I think he really does make that switch. But 12 is insane. Like, come on.
Yeah. And so just to be a little more specific, though, they've been ranked in multiple lists as they go. I won't name all the lists.
Sure.
But they're in the greatest rock and roll acts of all time on VH1's lists and all those things. Some other things I did mention, multiple tracks have been included into these songs that shaped rock and roll and in the Rock and Roll
Yeah.
Hall of Fame. Those are Smells Like Teen Spirit and All Apologies.
Okay.
The Library of Congress added Nevermind in its entirety to the National Recording Registry. 4 of Nirvana's songs appeared in the 2011 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. So, we're in the similar vein to Jimmy at that point.
Yeah.
So a lot of important things.
I agree. What number do you think here?
I think realistically, for the amount of people that have cited Nirvana directly as a reference, for the high profile of all of it, including the death of Jimi Hendrix, including the death of Kurt Cobain. It's rough when both people are.
I know they're the same. They're the same band.
It's crazy.
It's like totally different music, but the same. Like so much about it is the same.
Yeah, and I think like a 9.5 is the floor.
I
here.
already typed it in,
and I think that's where we go. Perfect.
All right, so Breath.
The rest of these should be faster.
Yeah. So Breath of Work, they both start at 2.5 because they both only released 3 albums. The Hendrix Experience, from my research, has probably sold in the vicinity of about 30 million records worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably going to boost them to 2.5 to 2.8 ish or 2.9. It's your call. Which one?
We'll do 2.9.
Now I will do something that I don't often do. I will give them a 0.4. That is not something I can roll out with great frequency. I save a 0.5 for like someone I would consider my top 10 favorite band or artist of all time. And they missed that by a little.
Yeah. I will also give them a 0.4.
Excellent.
Obviously, I was debating whether or not I wanted to dole out a 0.5.
It is a 3.7 then. So that's good growth. Nirvana also starts at 2.5. How much do we need to boost them for sales?
Well,
I know Nevermind is 30 million by itself.
Yes, Nevermind is 30 million by itself. And then we've got In Utero with 15 other million.
Yeah.
And Bleach throwing 2 million in the bucket.
Sure.
Still throwing in, still a multi-platinum.
Almost all those sales came after the success of Nevermind, but that's okay.
Of course, but they still sold.
Yeah.
So we're talking, in the 46-ish million range, roughly.
Of course.
And that's not including singles, which.
So we're already starting in like the 3 here.
I think the 3 is fair. We're starting at a 3.
Good. And what would you like to give them from your heart?
Realistically, I'm probably going to give them the 0.4 again.
Okay.
I like the diversity throughout all of Nevermind and most of In Utero more than makes up for the misses, the pockmarks that are on Bleach.
Mm-hmm.
And even those, you can hear the building blocks of what's going to happen.
And for me, it's a 0.3, if I'm being honest. So
sure,
that actually ties our artist with a 3.7 there.
Okay.
Instrumental talent. So we're going to start from the point where Jimi Hendrix is a 10 on guitar. And we're going to go from there. And I think our answer is still probably in the 9s. Jimmy, I think, is a very good singer, although like a very unique and different singer. Mitch Mitchell,
Mhm.
I think, is a fabulous drummer.
Yeah.
He's fantastic. Noel Redding, I think, holds it down well on bass. Um, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I think the numbers gotta remain in the nines for the Hendrix Experience.
Okay. Well,
It's
here
like
I'll give you.
he's the most iconic instrumentalist of all time.
I will give you my rundown of the members.
Go ahead.
Jimmy's a 10 on guitar. Jimmy's probably a 6 on vocal.
Sure.
So that's what we got so far. Noel, I'll give him probably like a 6.5 on vocal, but it's infrequent at best.
Mhm.
But I think he's the better pure vocalist. It's
Okay, I get
just,
that.
it's he's not the more iconic vocalist, and his voice is slightly less unique. I will say that, but
Mhm.
sheer talent,
Yeah.
he's probably a little more technically talented. But I will then give him in the upper eights on the bass.
Okay.
I felt like that was fair. And Mitch, I will give in the nines on the drum. It felt super tight and stayed the whole time, and I never had any moments of boredom from the drums.
Yeah,
And I think all that
definitely
together
not.
probably boils down, like taking vocals into account for me, probably like a 9.4.
Okay. I just to be clear, Mitch Mitchell was named the 8th greatest drummer of all time in Rolling Stones.
I did in fact put him in the nines on it. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
No. I
I
just wanted
approve.
to say that for, you know.
I'm glad because I like to be reaffirmed that I do in fact know what I'm talking about
All
sometimes.
right, 9.4. I'll give that to you. Nirvana. The number is lower. It's
It's
not
lower.
badder. It's not bad. It's
It's
not
not
bad.
bad.
It's not bad. It's certainly not below average, especially once you have Grohl on the drums. But this number is merely good instead of great
Yeah.
to
I
me.
here's what I'm probably in the sevens.
I would be fine.
I'm probably in the sevens. I think Chris Novoselic has been good the whole time and has been
Mhm.
solidly holding them together the whole time. I think the upgrade to Dave Grohl is just so evident.
Yeah,
And the fact that he's on 2 of the albums is really helps them. And then I think the growth of Kurt Cobain all the way through and his very unique vocal ability, as you mentioned earlier,
yeah,
to get that like guttural scream to sound as good as it does, and to the point where like most covers of Nirvana songs sound a little lacking because of that, because
sure.
most people have to actually sing those notes
Yeah, it's not
and
easy.
they can't just howl them. And so I'm probably in the sevens. I could go to a 7.5.
And I think that would be plenty for this group. So I'm more than happy
Cool.
to give it to him. 7.5. We move on to songwriting. Again, both started at 2.5 for only having 3 albums.
Yeah.
And I think both definitely exceed that 2.5 for the uniqueness, the
Yeah.
newness, the groundbreakingness of their work. If I'm going to be honest with you, to me, the Hendrix Experience gets more here.
Sure. I'm okay with that.
I think it has to be at least in the threes, where we have to give them a point over what they would have gotten.
I mean, sheer sales too, not just our enjoyment, like sheer sales.
Yeah, I mean, like, so I would be okay with Nirvana. Okay, so we're kind of let's think of it this way. We're extrapolating what our number would be if there were double the albums. So it
Right,
should
of
be
course.
half. So if we were going to give them a 7, it's a 3.5. And for me, like that is kind of in the neighborhood of where I'd be comfortable putting Nirvana in the sevens. So for
Mhm.
them, I'd be at a 3 point something. For the Hendrix Experience, I might be in the eights. So I might be more comfortable at around a 4 for them.
Yeah, let's do this. I would say let's give Nirvana a 3.6. I think that's good. And I would be comfortable giving the actual 4 to Jimi Hendrix Experience.
Excellent. And then we're moving on, and it's poetic talent as our final category here.
This
I
is
think that there were moments for the Hendrix Experience which showed that
yes.
they were not basic, that they were not just phoning it in, that they were not just average. So I do think that this number is also going above a 2.5, but it is not as significant as songwriting.
No, that is correct. And I also, we have in the past made more of a point to not super punish less than 6 for these two categories particularly.
Mhm.
So I want to be clear. I remembered that in between these two, so we could even revisit the previous one if you wanted.
I think
Uh,
we've been, like, in recent seasons, I'll say, we've been pretty, s like, formulaic about it.
yeah, but I mean, there's room, is what I'm saying.
Sure.
I think, like, realistically, especially when I read more about his writing process and realized how, like, he just kind of viewed, like, Nevermind, he basically wrote the lyrics for these songs like an hour or two before they recorded them.
That's
And
crazy.
to have the immediate significance of mind to pen shit like that quickly. Or you know what? I'm sorry. I'm misremembering. He did that for Bleach and In Utero.
Oh, okay.
And Nevermind, he actually like basically cut up and reframed various poems he'd written in the years between Bleach and the
Why
release of
didn't he
Nevermind.
fucking do that for all the other albums?
I don't know. I don't know. He didn't really put much thought into the lyrics, and it's crazy because I think even on In Utero, and even in some of Bleach, like the lyrics are like good and well thought out and like haunting in times,
Mhm.
and like the way that he speaks is so interesting to me because he's clearly speaking of things that matter, and for somebody who almost every that he's taken his life is like all talking about his pain. A lot of their music is not about Kurt Cobain's personal pain. It's about other things.
Mhm.
It's about like, you know, like the world and like his view of the entire world. And I think that's such a unique writing point for somebody who clearly had a lot of pain in his life as well.
Mhm.
I'm very high on Nirvana.
Alright, well, give me both of your scores.
So I think for Jimi Hendrix, I would probably be a little above average because of some of the
Right.
bangers.
Mhm.
I'd probably be in like the 5-6 range.
So, the 2.7,
Yeah, 2.8,
2.8? Alright,
2.8.
2.8 it is, and for Nirvana, you're more like in the 3s, is what I'm hearing.
Probably even higher, man.
Okay.
If we're talking, if we're putting it in six, so here's what we do.
Yeah, put
If
it
we're
in
putting
terms
it
of
in
10.
6 albums, putting it in terms of out of 10 for 6 albums where I'm not penalizing them,
Sure.
I could legitimately be in the like high eights for I
Okay.
think the sheer power of the writing.
So how about a 4-4?
I think that works. I think that's good.
And now let's talk X Factor.
Neither of
Uh,
them get it. They're
no.
pretty much done.
Yeah, that's it. Now they both get the 27 club.
Right.
Uh, Hendrix Experience gets the Woodstock point. I think they get
Hmm.
maybe a little bonus on top of that for
For
being
headlining
the
it.
headliner.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just, of all the things that I ran down on the resume of, like, I'm having a very hard time not wanting to give very close to 5, especially
Yeah.
because, I mean, like, we give 2 points for genre. How many points do we give for, like, no one has redefined the way that an instrument was played in rock music the way that Jimi Hendrix did. I mean, you cannot not hear him. If someone plays guitar, you will hear in some way, directly or through someone he influenced, along the way, you will hear Hendrix.
Put the 5 down. We got this.
Okay.
He earned it.
And then
Nirvana
Nirvana.
gets 2 points for grunge.
Okay. Yep.
I know
I
they
agree.
did it simultaneously with other people, but they're
Yeah.
the band.
They are the biggest face of the movement
Yeah.
for sure.
So they get the 2 grunge points
I
for
agree.
genre.
They get the
Uh,
27 club point.
they get the 27 club point. I also think they get a little bit, as you mentioned, for like they get an extra point for the headstock or the Woodstock point for Jimi Hendrix. I think they get a little bit of the bonus point for the 27 Club because of the rampant theorizing on the death of Kurt Cobain forever.
That's true.
Like the Courtney Love situation, that he couldn't reach the trigger of the shotgun,
Yeah.
like all of that stuff. It's arguably in my lifetime the highest profile like conspiracy theory other than the JFK assassination.
Sure.
Is what I've always heard about that.
It's up. Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah. So I think that's a big one. And then I think I saved this for now. I think another thing that's X Factor points is the like huge lawsuit that had gone on for Spencer Eldon, who is the baby on the Nevermind cover, who sued like the Nirvana estate, basically the company that that houses Nirvana, to for like a bunch of money and like for damages that he sustained for appearing nude on the cover as a baby, and citing that it was done without his consent or the consent of his legal guardians, and that it was the distribution of child pornography he was claiming. Now, other things that are important about this, just to talk about it, are that Spencer Eldon, until he sued in 2021, had posed at least 5 public times in the recreation of the cover and done interviews and like clearly profited off it, and has a tattoo of Nevermind across his chest. You take of that of what you will. The case has been dismissed multiple times. He's appealing it again currently, I believe. But it's a high profile public discussion to be had. And I think that also is a little bit X Factor.
Sure. So are we in like the 4s?
I think we're in the 4s. I think probably like we can go all of those things combined. I could see like a 4.5.
And I would love to give it, and I would love to give you final scores.
Let's do it.
So again, 2 artists who were starting off like in terms of their points handicapped by our system. Here are our final scores. Our winner this week is the Jimi Hendrix Experience with a 34.9.
Yep.
Which is a pretty unheard of score for an artist that only
Put out
released
3
3
albums.
albums.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be honest with you, like very close behind them with a 33.2 is Nirvana.
Yeah.
So only 1.7 points ended up separating them.
I mean, dude, I get it. I get it. Both of them well-earned spots.
Oh, yeah.
Fully get the hype of both of those artists. And this was a fun one.
It was. I know.
This was a fun one. It was good to talk about.
I'm almost afraid to come back next week. Because next week we have like a very different feel. We've got some indie pop of the 2000s. So a couple of those. Each artist has at least one really big song that I know of. So
exciting.
We shall see where that goes.
That means typically if they're in the 2000s and you know one, that means I might know 2 or 3.
We shall see.
So that's exciting.
I've seen one of these bands in concert, believe it or not.
So you have to know more than one song.
Well, I've heard more than one song.
That's fair.
But anyway, we'll save that discussion for next week.
Hell yeah, we will. Listen, man, this has been a great time. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Anybody who stuck around for the whole thing, we're happy to have you. We really appreciate you for all that you do. Please continue to support us. And most importantly, have a great day. All right, that's 2 episodes in.
Well done.
Whew.
How you feeling?
Tired.
Yeah.
Tired. Well, I mean,
I've seen Small Pools, by the way, which was
what?
maybe not the one you expected. I have seen Small Pools.
Interesting. I am surprised.
As like an opening act.
Oh well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But
so do you want to do Small Pools then, and I'll do Foster the People?
Yeah, sure. You got it.
Okay.
Oh yeah, our time 3:15. Yeah, we've been on for a while.
Yes. Yes.
I'm on a plane.
So
Mm.
with that, I'm going to wrap us up
All right,
quick on
great.
this stream as well. Uh, Anybody who stuck around the whole time, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Keith. I mean, I'm
On a
assuming
plane.
you've been kicking in and out, doing it all the
Mm.
way through. I'd be impressed.
Yeah.
But thanks for hanging out, man. And anybody else who may have popped in or out or sees this at another point, if it ever comes out and sees light of day, thank you for sticking around. And I'm gonna play our swan song and sign us off if
Very
I
good.
can find our swan song. Goodbye.